Chapter 2461. Immediately after, he very abruptly fell backward limply. Young Master. Shocked, Linggu hurriedly went up to support fifth young Master Qin as she looked at her young master in horror. Fifth Qin didn't expect that his illness would act up again here. This illness came with such ferocity that it could topple mountains and overturn seas. For a moment, his entire body turned ice-cold, and he couldn't stop trembling. Gritting his teeth, he firmly grabbed Ling Ji's hand and said, "Let's go." How could Ling Gu dare to hesitate? She quickly supported her young master's arm and signaled the hidden guard with her eyes. After supporting fifth young master, the group quickly turned and left. This time, there was no time to pursue Mu Rou Yan's matter. Upon seeing this, Mu Rou Xian also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although she wasn't afraid of the Qin family's power, it would naturally be best if they didn't offend them. If they really offended the Qin estate, then the issue of medicinal pills would also be a huge headache for the Mu family. After all, that was the #1 medicinal patrician family. Arbor swept a glance at them and pursed his lips dispiritedly. Boring. They only fought for a short while and it's already over. She hadn't seen enough of the commotion. Poor Jojo. It was mainly because that youth's body was too weak. They hadn't even made a move on him, yet he had already collapsed first. It truly made one speechless. Was it really good for a youth's body to be so weak? Translator, Atlas Studios editor, Atlas Studios. A fair and tender hand tugged at her husband's sleeve. Although no expression could be discerned from Miss Chiao's stoic face, Mo Lien still miraculously sensed her wife's displeasure. Lowering her head and smiling at her, Mo Lien said softly, "I'll make something delicious for you when we get back." She then led her out of the corridor. But right at this moment, the maidservant beside Mu Rou Yan looked at Arbor with a flicker in her eyes. She hurriedly whispered a few words into Mu Rou Yan's ear. Mu Rou Yan's originally pale face immediately glowed, and her eyes flickered as she asked softly, "Did you see clearly?" This servant saw it clearly. This servant arrived a bit earlier than the missus. At that time, the river was filled with shoals of fish, and it was that young lady who took out a storage talisman. The Mu family maidservant's eyes flickered as she looked at Xiao Mu, and she quickly explained to Mu Ruyan. Mu Rou Yan's thoughts immediately moved. She saw that the plain-clothed woman pointed at by the servant girl was about to walk out of the corridor with a man. She hurriedly shouted from behind without thinking, "Hey, that girl, stop right there." Compared to Mu Rou Yan, Mu Rou Xian was much more composed and elegant. Upon hearing this, she couldn't help but glare at her angrily. "Don't cause any more trouble for me." She simply hated this concubine-born sister to death. She was unable to accomplish anything but was good at spoiling things. With her arrogant and peacock personality, sooner or later, she would bring disaster to the entire Mu family. "Big sister, what did I do?" Mu Rou Yan was also angry with Mu Rou Xian. She thought in her heart that this Mu Rou Xian was truly evil. She clearly had the opportunity to rescue her from the Qin estate secret guards, yet she just had to wait for so long, causing her to make a fool of herself in front of everyone. She would settle this score with her when she returned. Mu Rou Yan already bore a grudge against Mu Rou Xian in her heart. When she heard this, she only glanced coldly at her before ordering the maidservants beside her to clamor. "Are they all dead? Go and stop them." A few Mu family maidservants rushed up and bared their fangs and brandished their claws to touch Arbor's arm. Unexpectedly, before they could get close, they were stopped by the cold-faced Fang Su, Eunuch Hu, and the others. Impudent. Chapter 2462. Eunuch Hu had been by the emperor's side for a long time and had unknowingly developed the aura of a superior. This kind of aura could not be seen with the naked eye, but one could feel it when standing beside them. With such a simple shout, the Moo family's maidservants were stunned. They shrunk their heads and withdrew their hands. Their gazes were somewhat frightened as they froze on the spot. Mu Ro Yen flung Mu Ro Xian's hand away and quickly walked forward, her gaze sweeping over Arbor. Suddenly, her gaze paused on Prince Mo. The man in front of her was truly magnificent. His appearance was outstanding, and it was hard not to notice him. However, his cold gaze and uncontrollable aura made Mu Ro Yen shrink her neck. Even if she wanted to, she did not have the guts to touch such a tyrannical man. Thinking about it, the Qin estate's fifth young master was gentle and handsome, with a good temperament. At this moment, Mu Ro Yen had probably forgotten about the fifth young master's coldness and ruthlessness towards her. She thought back to the fifth young master's gentle smile at the flower-admiring banquet hosted by Madame Gua. At that time, she suspected that she was flying in the sky. She could clearly feel the aura of the clouds and the wind. It was really too beautiful. Arbor sized up the woman in front of her. Seeing her idiotic expression, she could not help but ask, "What are you doing?" "A good dog does not block the way." This woman had rushed forward after scolding her. With so many people surrounding them, it was obvious that she was up to no good. Arbor originally did not expect to clash with the Mu family so quickly. Unfortunately, things did not go as she wished. There were always blind Mu family members who came to provoke her. Since that was the case, she would beat them until they did not dare to bother her again. The little fellow secretly hooked her finger, preparing to summon the feral to attack. She heard Mu Ro Yan's idiotic voice say to her, "You. Hand over the storage talisman." Arbor. Did she hear wrongly? Was there something wrong with her ears, or was there something wrong with this woman's brain? Why did she think that Sir Jojo would take out the storage talisman and respectfully hand it to her when she, Mu Ro Yen, opened her mouth? Did she think that she was a queen? Jojo-sama was still a young emperor. This was simply inexplicable and unreasonable. Arbor narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to flare up, Mu Roxuan rushed over and tugged at Mu Rian. She said impatiently, "What are you doing?" Arbor wasn't the only one who felt that Mu Ro Yen was crazy. Even Mu Ro Yan's eldest sister, Mu Ro Xian, felt that her stepsister's brain had been dug out and filled with shit. "Who do you think you are?" Arbor scolded coldly. "Get lost." The little girl's scolding tone was neither high nor low, and her words were very sharp. She was too lazy to say anything more. Mu Ro Yen was so angry that her face turned red. She stretched out her arms to block the two of them, decisively blocking their path. However, her mouth continued to clamor, "You little slut, you dare to be so arrogant after being a thief. I dare you to say that again." Xiaomu glared with an ominous glint in her eyes. The little girl did not have any protective feelings for the fairer sex. She was ready to beat someone up at any time. This Mu Ro Yen must be tired of living. For some reason, Mu Ro Yan's originally nonsensical words were stuffed into her throat by the little girl's fierce glare. What was going on? She was actually intimidated by this woman before her. Chapter 2463. Mu Ro Yen couldn't stand this thought. How could she be scared by a woman who came out of nowhere and cower in fear? It must be an illusion. An illusion. Mu Ro Yan's eyes were red with anger. She pointed at Arbor and turned to Mu Ro Xian. "Big sister, do you know? This person stole our Mu family's storage talisman. I want her to hand it over now." "What did I do wrong?" Mu Ro Xian was stunned. Then, she carefully sized up Arbor. The little girl's appearance was so outstanding that people couldn't help but hold their breath when they looked at her. However, there wasn't any extra expression on her snow-white face. Her pair of ink-like eyes were especially captivating. Arbor was so angry that she was amused. Her cold gaze swept across the little girl beside Mu Ro Yen. What kind of enmity did this girl have with her that she would accuse her like this? That girl couldn't help but shrink her head and lower it guiltily. Arbor didn't remember seeing this girl beside Mu Ro Yen. Perhaps this little girl had seen it when she used the storage talisman to collect the fish this morning. There were so many people present at that time. She wasn't like Mo Lien, who had a photographic memory and could remember everyone. She was there. Mo Lien didn't even need her to ask. She nodded and gave the answer directly. Although the scene was chaotic at the time, with Crown Prince Mo's eidetic memory, he was naturally able to take in everyone present and recount all the details of the scene. Arbor's wrist moved slightly. A storage talisman surrounded by blue light was released from her hand and hung in front of her. Are you talking about this talisman? That's right. Mu Ro Yan's eyes suddenly lit up. Without another word, she reached out to grab the storage talisman. She arrogantly said, "You still dare to not admit that you stole our Mu family's talisman? Who in the entire Divine Mainland doesn't know that it's a storage talisman? Only the Mu family knows how to draw it. Who do you think you are? You stole our Mu family's talisman and still dare to not admit it. How dare you be so impudent here?" Miss Chow's cold, electrifying gaze landed on the hand that was reaching for the storage talisman. A wisp of blue spiritual cleansing flame suddenly appeared in his palm. Without any explanation, he threw it over and it abruptly exploded on the back of Mu Ro Yan's hand. Ah! Mu Ro Yan subconsciously reached out to cover the back of her hand that had turned red from the heat. Her eyes instantly turned red with anger as she stared at Arbor and screamed, "You crazy woman! What are you doing? Who's the crazy one? Those who aren't blind will be able to tell." Arbor stared coldly at the woman in front of him and approached her step by step. "Then do you dare to make a bet with me?" Mu Ro Yen would never admit it. For a moment, she retreated 2 steps in fear. "Let's bet on which one of us can draw a storage talisman on the spot." Arbor looked at her coldly and took another step forward. "Do you dare? Idiot! If you can make an identical blue storage talisman, I will publicly apologize to your Mu family. You can beat me or scold me as you please. If you can't..." Her voice instantly turned cold. She pointed at Mu Ro Yan's chest and said sternly, "Then kneel down. Kowtow 100 times to me and admit your mistake. Loudly tell everyone that you're the reincarnation of a stupid pig and possessed by a drama queen." Mu Ro Yen abruptly took a step back. If it weren't for the 2 Mu family girls supporting her from behind, her legs might have given way. Chapter 2464. Mu Ro Yan's lips quivered as she fiercely swallowed down a mouthful of saliva. She glared at Xiao Mu with flickering eyes. On what basis should I, the second miss of the Mu family, accept your bet just because you say you want to bet? You don't dare." Arbor raised his hand and patted Mu Ro Yan's cheek. His cold eyes were filled with a vicious glint. "If you don't dare, then behave yourself from now on. If you see me, then take a detour in the future. Do you hear me?" The little girl's voice was slow and crisp, like a light feather gently brushing past everyone's hearts. "Ro Yen, stop fooling around." How could Mu Ro Xian not know how shallow her stepsister's eyelids were? She must have heard from the servant beside her that this little girl had a storage talisman. She must have been very envious and wanted to snatch the storage talisman from her. After all, this storage talisman was an extremely precious item even in their Mu family. It was a reward for those who had made outstanding contributions to the family. Although Mu Ro Yen was the second miss of the Mu family and her stepsister, she had never owned a storage talisman in her entire life. Mu Ro Yen stiffened her neck. Of course, she couldn't shrink back just like that. Otherwise, what would others think of her as the second miss of the Mu family? Bet. 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 Mu Rochuan, who was standing behind her, was so angry that her eyes turned red. If it weren't for the fact that they were in front of so many people, she really wanted to give her a slap and beat her up until her head split open. Stupid pig, she was indeed a big stupid pig. That girl really didn't say anything wrong about her. She was already like this, yet she still fell for someone else's provocation. Was this girl born without a brain? It was a small matter for her to agree, but when the time came, the Mu family would lose a lot of face. The entire Mu family would become the laughingstock of the entire divine continent because of this idiotic sentence. Since that little girl could make such a bet, the truth was very obvious, okay? That storage talisman must have been personally drawn by that little girl. That's why she was so sure that she could win. Mu Ro Yen, this stupid pig, stupid pig. Mu Ro Xian was so angry that her chest hurt. She couldn't help but reach out and pound her chest, breathing heavily. Although she didn't understand why such a young girl was able to create the long-lost storage talisman, she was certain of one thing. That stupid pig Mu Ro Yen was only an intermediate talisman master. It was impossible for her to create a storage talisman. Taking a deep breath, Mu Rochuan stepped forward and shouted, "Ruyan, don't mess around. Big sister. Why do you always side with outsiders and help them bully your own sister?" Mu Ro Yen looked at her angrily. Mu Rochuan was so infuriated by this concubine-born younger sister that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. She gave her 2 maidservants a look and angrily said, "Help second miss leave." However, Mu Ro Yen refused no matter what. Her arms were restrained by the 2 maidservants, and she kept twisting and turning her body. Her eyes were red from anger as she glared at Mu Ro Xian and said, "Eldest sister, I know you don't like me. My talisman crafting talent isn't as high as yours. But you don't have to insult your own sister in front of outsiders." Mu Rochuan took a deep breath and turned her gaze to Arbor with a trace of cold anger. If it weren't for this girl being so overbearing, how could the Mu family be forced to this state? "I'll bet with you." "I accept the challenge." Mu Rochuan forcefully suppressed her anger and said calmly, "Make up for yesterday's 2 chapters." Chapter 2465. Xiao Mu nodded and didn't say anything else, only replying with a "okay." It didn't matter who she bet with. Right now, she only wanted to give the Mu family a good slap in the face. Why? There was no reason. She couldn't stand their arrogance, so she was itching for a fight. Both of them took a few steps forward and stood side by side. Mu Rochuan was definitely inferior to Jojo in terms of looks alone. Fortunately, Mu Rochuan was much smarter than her younger sister, Mu Ruyan. She knew that her looks weren't bad, but her looks couldn't be considered outstanding. There were definitely plenty of people in the world who were more beautiful than her. She also wouldn't be so arrogant as to think that she was the prettiest in the world. If she was in front of a woman with top-notch looks, she would be easily defeated. Then what would she rely on to win by surprise? Thus, Mu Rochuan had always paid great attention to nurturing her own temperament. In addition, her mother, Mu Qingya, was an extremely intelligent and far-sighted woman. Her taste and makeup skills formed a style of their own. Thus, after being nurtured from a young age and nurturing her temperament, the current Mu Rochuan could reach 9 points with her makeup alone. After many years of unremitting effort, Mu Rochuan successfully turned herself into a dignified, quiet, intelligent, and magnanimous woman. In the imperial capital of the divine province, who didn't give a thumbs up and praise the Mu family's eldest miss? Now, she stood there naturally and gracefully with a temperament as calm as water. Coupled with her beautiful face with almond-shaped eyes and rosy cheeks, she was extremely eye-catching and didn't lose out to the little stoic in the slightest. Begin. Arbor turned to glance at her and then said aloofly, "The time limit is 10 minutes. Whoever can draw a blue storage talisman wins." Mu Rochuan's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean? This young lady was so certain. Could it be that she could draw a blue storage talisman in 10 minutes? What kind of joke was this? Jojo had already given more than 10 minutes out of consideration for this Mu family's eldest miss. In reality, the little fellow's proficiency in drawing storage talismans had basically reached the point where she could draw them in one go. Lotus had always reminded her that in front of outsiders, the speed of refining pills and creating talismans must be slowed down, and slowed down again and again. It was said that when those talisman masters and alchemy masters saw her drawing talismans and refining pills so quickly, they would gang up and beat her up. He was simply crazy. Jojo took a deep breath, wondering how fast he should complete the blue storage talisman. From that side, Mu Ro Yan's piercing voice entered her ears. The time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Are you kidding me? Unless you've prepared a blue storage talisman beforehand, it's absolutely impossible. Mu Ro Xian really wanted to go up and slap this concubine-born younger sister of hers to death. Her mother, Mu Qingya, had always told her that there was always someone better than her in this world. She shouldn't be arrogant and short-sighted. This concubine-born sister followed concubine Sure and acted like a concubine all day long. She had been completely led astray. Her illegitimate sister was the one who had the most responsibility for the current situation. Of course, it was also inseparable from the girl in front of her who was aggressive. Mu Ro Xian silently took out a small table, cinnabar, and a talisman brush from her inner world. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, she calmly picked up the brush and began to draw. In the current situation, the more she said, the more mistakes she would make. Many people were waiting to see the Mu family become a joke. It would be better for her to calm down and properly draw a storage talisman to prove that her Mu family was truly capable. Chapter 2466. Actually, Mu Rochuan was very uncertain. She had never successfully drawn a storage talisman before. The main reason was that there was a large missing part in the Mu family's talisman technique inheritance. Starting from the ancestor, the Mu family's talisman technique had been passed down for thousands of years. Over the years, the Mu family's talisman technique had become very incomplete. The systematic method of drawing storage talismans was not recorded in the ancient books. The ancestor relied on his own wisdom and talisman crafting experience to explore step by step. Until now, he had only successfully made 19 storage talismans. Only one of them was a blue storage talisman. She had already engraved the runes in her mind several years ago. She was one of the top figures in the Mu family's younger generation. Ever since she became a high-level talisman master, she was able to go to the top floor of the Mu family's most secretive talisman building to learn the best talisman techniques. All these years, she had been devoting herself to drawing runes. She really wanted to draw a storage talisman with her own hands. Even if it was just a small storage talisman that could store a few cubic meters of items, she would be perfectly satisfied. But until now, she had never succeeded. She didn't know if there was something wrong with her recitation of the runes. But she had clearly memorized the extremely secretive storage talisman in her heart. There couldn't have been a mistake. Taking a deep breath, Mu Rochuan forced herself to calm down. She dipped the talisman brush in cinnabar, spread out a talisman paper, and quickly drew on it. With a twist of her wrist, strands of yellow-level talisman energy seeped into it. Mu Rochuan was naturally confident that no one would be able to learn anything from drawing a talisman in front of everyone. After all, even if someone had a photographic memory and completely memorized this storage talisman, if they didn't have a systematic talisman cultivation method, it would still be impossible for them to craft talismans. After all, the foundation for talisman masters to craft talismans was to rely on their own talisman energy. This was equivalent to a person who only had moves but no inner strength, unable to display anything. Talisman masters were particular about inheritance. No family would spread the talisman energy cultivation method that they had inherited and developed. Mu-Rian's brush moved and carefully drew the talisman in her hand. Even if there were people who wanted to learn it, they would feel a headache when they saw the winding runes in the middle of the book. If one continued to stare at Mu-Rian's talismans, they would feel a piercing pain in their conscience. Although ordinary people didn't have much of a reaction, staring at someone else drawing talismans made them feel a little dizzy for some reason. They didn't dare to look closely. This was where the Mu clan's confidence lay. Not just anyone could learn the Mu clan's talisman crafting techniques. Arbor, on the other hand, wasn't that particular. She had been watching Mu-Rian craft talismans with some interest. Even she herself wasn't sure how vast her talisman energy was. Anyway, she was much taller than Mu-Rian, so even if he stared at her, it was impossible to stimulate his conscience, let alone make him dizzy. As she watched, she couldn't help but twitch her mouth. What kind of nonsense was this drawing? If she hadn't seen the drawing process of this storage talisman with her own eyes, she might have really thought that this was just a talisman drawn on a piece of paper. What kind of inheritance did the Mu family have? Why was this ghost drawn so confusing and complicated that even a profound great talisman master like her couldn't understand it? Could it be that the Mu family deliberately taught him this? Chapter 2467. The purpose was to prevent the legacy of the talisman art from being stolen by outsiders. That was why it was so complicated and difficult to draw. Mu-Rian's forehead was drenched in sweat as she carefully drew nearly dozens of strokes for something that originally required 3 strokes. That shouldn't be possible. Lady Jojo shook her head with a puzzled look on her face. From beginning to end, Lian's gaze never shifted away from his wifey. Seeing her shake her head, he couldn't help but laugh inwardly, thinking that his Jojo must have misunderstood something again. Jojo, you can ask your husband if you have any questions. Lian's lips curled up slightly, and there was a faint smile in his voice. Miss Chow subconsciously scratched her head and whispered, "Husband, is the Mu family's legacy of talismans the best in the Divine Continent?" Yes. Lian nodded with certainty. In the entire upper 3 provinces, the Mu family's legacy of talismans is one of the best. Tsang province's talisman family, the Qi family, is also much inferior to the Mu family. The Mu family has produced many talents in recent generations, and many of the high-grade talismans circulating in the world are produced by the Mu family. They are exceptionally precious. Then their talisman crafting technique was just so. Arbor racked her brains to think of a word, crude. That's right, it was crude. The runes on this talisman were drawn like tadpoles. Wasn't it incomparably crude? Mu-Rian, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but exclaim excitedly, "Ha ha ha, I-oh." Someone started a serious bet, but unexpectedly, they shot themselves in the foot. How laughable. She saw that Arbor stood there for a long time without moving his brush and just stared blankly at Mu-Rian drawing talismans. She thought that Sir Jojo was shocked by the Mu family's talisman crafting technique. Yes, it was indeed shocking, Arbor thought to himself. It was her first time seeing such crude runes. Wasn't the Mu family an aristocratic family with a 1,000-year-old legacy? A talisman aristocratic family that had existed for thousands of years, and their talisman technique was actually just a scribbled talisman. Miss Chow blinked and looked at Mu-Rian for a long time. Finally, she felt that Mu-Rian did not deliberately use a trick to deceive her by painting in such a vulgar way. She was really drawing runes for the storage talisman, but she didn't understand the main points. Miss Chiao scratched her small face, feeling as if she had an unfair advantage. Her thin brows continued to furrow as she stared at Mu Roxuan, not moving for a long time. This time, Mu Ro Yen looked even more arrogant. She simply put her hands on her hips and laughed loudly. She shouted at Arbor, "What? You haven't dared to draw anything yet. Are you planning to admit defeat?" "Ha!" Miss Chiao pursed her lips and remained silent for a long time. She felt that this bet was meaningless. If both sides had similar combat strength, it would have been more exciting to compete, but now that the eldest daughter of the Mu family was clearly not on the same level as her. What was the point of continuing to compete like this? This eldest Miss Mu had been drawing for a long time but still hadn't finished. She had been waiting for her for almost the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Miss Chiao raised her head to glance at Mo Lien, her small eyes filled with unhappiness. Mo Lien's heart softened as she looked at her. She held her small hand and said softly, "Let's not compete anymore." "Then, let's go back." Arbor nodded his small head. She had no choice but to move her feet. Mu Ruyan, who was glaring at her from the side, suddenly jumped out and shouted, "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. You lost. Kneel down and kowtow, and accept any beating or scolding. You said it." Chapter 2468. Arbor's cold gaze shot over with a hint of mockery on her lips. Just like that, he stared straight at Mu Ro Yen, causing the latter to feel increasingly guilty under his gaze. Of course, she felt guilty. After all, she was the one who accepted the challenge, but eldest sister had changed at the last minute. And now, eldest sister was unable to draw a storage talisman within the stipulated 10 minutes. Although the little girl didn't draw a talisman, anyone with a discerning eye knew that this competition would end in a draw at the very least. It was just that the eldest miss of a talisman patrician family had failed to draw a talisman on the spot. This wouldn't be pleasant if word got out. In the end, the Mu family was still the one who was at a disadvantage in this competition. When others mentioned it in the future, they would only sigh and say that the Mu family had declined. The so-called genius eldest miss was probably nothing more than this. Look, look. Hey! What's wrong with eldest Miss Mu? At this moment, someone suddenly pointed at Mu Ro Xian and cried out in alarm. Arbor turned around and saw that the storage talisman on the table in front of Mu Ro Xian had already flown up and emitted a faint yellow glow in the air. Eldest sister. Mu Ro Yen widened her eyes in surprise. Arbor was expressionless. Mu Ro Xian's talisman energy was depleted, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Eldest miss. The two maids behind her hurriedly stepped forward and reached out to support her. The crowd surrounding the entrance of the corridor exclaimed in unison. "Oh my goodness, eldest Miss Mu succeeded. A storage talisman, it's a storage talisman." Eldest Miss Mu drew a storage talisman on the spot. Arbor was speechless. She had never seen someone spit out blood while drawing a talisman. Mu Ro Xian must have used some secret technique to forcefully increase her talisman drawing speed, so she exhausted all her talisman energy and ended up spitting out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Mu's face darkened as she gazed at that woman with a tranquil expression and a somewhat unfocused gaze. She watched as the woman collapsed weakly onto the girl's body, her chest rising and falling as she gasped for air. Miss Chiao looked up at the sky speechlessly. If she had to draw hundreds and thousands of talismans in a night like this, eldest Miss Mu. He didn't even have enough blood to vomit. If it weren't for the fact that eldest Miss Mu was so exhausted, she really wanted to go up and ask her, "Do you usually draw talismans like this? Won't your HP bar be empty? Could his body still take it?" Usually, the Qin estate must have purchased quite a few blood-replenishing pills. Needless to say, what Xiqiao thought in her head was indeed realistic. The Mu family really did purchase a batch of blood-replenishing pills from the Qin estate every month, and the quantity was quite large. Arbor. Let's go. Sir Jojo turned around and pulled her husband away. Fong Su, Eunuch Hu, and the others naturally followed behind them. They stretched out their hands to block the two of them and separated some of the curious onlookers. Mu Rou Yen couldn't take it anymore and shouted angrily, "Stop right there. Stop her. You're actually leaving." What? Seeing my big sister create a storage talisman, you know you've lost, so you want to run away immediately. How could there be such a good thing in this world? Do you think you can take advantage of everything? When did I lose? Arbor asked coldly. Of course you lost. You didn't draw any talismans. And my big sister. Are you an idiot? What are the conditions of the bet? I said that you must draw a blue storage talisman within the time it takes to brew a cup of tea to win. What about you? The talisman drawing was painful to the eyes. Giving them face and not arguing with them didn't mean that Jojo was afraid of them. Chapter 2469. The main reason was that the gap between them was too big, so Jojo had no interest in continuing the bet with the Mu sisters. What genius young miss. She was simply ridiculous. Rumors were indeed rumors and could not be completely believed. Mu Rou Yan was still about to hoot when Mu Rou Xian weakly grabbed her wrist. The crowd parted to the sides and a man in green, about 20 years old, slowly walked over. His long black hair was tied behind his waist, and his cold eyes glanced indifferently at Mu Roxuan and her sister. Big brother. Mu Rou Yan cried out in surprise. Big brother was here. With Big brother backing her up, would she still be afraid of that wretched girl in front of her? Mu Xingqian's gaze only brushed past Mu Rou Yan's face before landing on Arbor's departing figure. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he abruptly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. With a whoosh, he flew to Arbor's side and reflexively reached out to grab her wrist. Qiao Mu immediately realized this with a start, but before she could do anything, Mo Lian had already pulled her into his embrace. He extended an arm in front of Mu Xingqian as he gazed coldly at the other party. What are you trying to do? Miss, do you still recognize me? Mu Xingqian was a bit anxious as he hurriedly said, I am Mu Xingqian, the Mu family's Mu Xingqian. Would it be possible for you to move to the boat with me? I have a few words to say to you. Cut the crap. Arbor looked at the man in front of her with displeasure. I'm not familiar with you at all, so there's nothing to say. The people of the Mu family were indeed all the same. Xingqian. Why are you walking so fast? A man's voice was heard hurriedly. Then, a familiar man ran over from the crowd. When he reached Mu Xingqian's side, he immediately saw Arbor. His expression was a bit surprised as he called out in a low voice, Jojo. Jojo. Seventh uncle, you know her. The ice on Mu Xingqian's face, which had remained frozen for 100 years, finally broke. He abruptly turned to look at Mu Jingrui, his eyes shining as he gazed at him. The fingers under his sleeves involuntarily curled up a few times, unable to contain the joy in his heart. Sure enough, he was right. This feeling of bloodline resonance was definitely not a lie. The little girl in front of him was his younger sister, his blood-related younger sister. Arbor's expression turned cold. He glanced at them indifferently. Shut up. Get out of the way. What's with your attitude? Mu Rou Yan shouted angrily. Shut up. Mu Xingqian impatiently interrupted Mu Rou Yan's scolding. Still staring at Arbor, he pursed his lips and said in a low voice, I don't believe that you didn't feel it. Just now, I was over there, separated by the torrential river and the dense crowd, but I could still feel you. Ha! Xiao Mu rolled her eyes mockingly. Don't be so vague, alright? I have nothing to do with you. Sorry, I don't feel anything. No, you do. Mu Xingqian bit his lip and shouted angrily. Xingqian. Mu Jingrui grabbed his arm, stopping his impulsive figure from rushing forward. You're crazy. Arbor coldly swept a glance at him. This glance was full of contempt, disdain, and indifference, mercilessly making one's heart tremble. It's that bad woman who taught you. She's the one who keeps bad-mouthing our Mu family in your ear. That's why you treat us as enemies, isn't that right? Arbor, who had wanted to leave, abruptly turned around and glared fiercely at that man. Mo Lian simply couldn't hold this little fellow back. Chapter 2470. She pounced forward, raised her small right hand, and ruthlessly slapped Mu Xingqian's face. She was so angry that her face flushed red and her entire body trembled. The ferocious beast in her heart uncontrollably wanted to emerge and crazily bite these people in front of her. She wanted to destroy the heavens and earth and make them suffer a fate worse than death. What woman? She shouted harshly, her almond-shaped eyes glaring unwaveringly at Mu Xingqian in front of her. When she let out a hysterical cry, she asked, "Who is that woman to you?" Mu Jingrui was stupefied. He had long known that the little fellow was not a good-natured person. After what happened to Lao Bai, he knew that the little fellow could kill Lao Bai mercilessly. He could kill anyone from the Mu family. You admit it. Mu Xingqian's eyes flashed as he looked at the little girl in front of him with 5 distinct claw marks. You know who I am. You! Scram! Arbor shouted angrily and kicked him without any hesitation. Xingqian! Mu Jingrui was shocked. Afraid that something bad would really happen to his nephew, he hurriedly dragged him back a few steps. Jojo, this is your older brother. You can't treat him like this. Mu Jingrui was also a bit angry as he said coldly. Scram! Arbor clenched his fists and shouted angrily. Following that, water rushed to the sky. Boom, 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 boom. It rushed out from all sides of the corridor and exploded like an explosion. The frightening water spirit energy shocked everyone. They hurriedly hugged their heads and crouched down to avoid the surging power. The entire river seemed to be surging and boiling at this moment. Crackle, crackle. The eaves around the corridor shattered piece by piece. Mu Ro Yen was drenched from head to toe by a water dragon. She fell to the ground, drenched, and stared at the little girl in front of her in horror. Was she a demon? What kind of frightening power was this? Jojo, Jojo. Mo Lian hugged his little wife from behind. He hugged her tightly and comforted her softly. Jojo, it's okay, Jojo. Don't follow me. The crown prince glared at Mu Xingqian and the others. The anger in his heart could not be concealed. Just now, his Jojo was still so happy, laughing heartily, her little face smiling like a little flower. How adorable. Now, he was in such a bad mood because of a few strange people. Mo Lian reached out and picked up the little fellow. With a flash, she returned to her official ship like a light cloud chasing after the moon. Jojo reached out and hooked his arms around his neck. Suddenly, he burst into tears. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out intermittently, "She's a stupid woman. Now, even her own son treats her like this. You think too highly of yourself. Patience in every possible way. Idiot." Arbor cried angrily. You think you're good to me, but you don't tell me anything. In the end, you made me suffer for the rest of my life, tossing and turning, destitute, and becoming mud for others to trample on. You think you can exchange for a smooth and safe life by being tolerant in every way. But you don't know that I'm long dead. And died so miserably and without dignity. Jojo. Mo Lien's pupils contracted as he hugged her tightly. This is my mother. She's so stupid. So stupid that I'm angry, so stupid that I'm going crazy. Tears rolled down Arbor's eyes. But my heart aches for her. My heart aches for her. Mo Lien. My heart aches for her. Fragmented Dreams. Chapter 2471. She remembered that Wei Ziqin had once asked her if she hated her birth mother. How could she hate her? How could she hate her? That day, when she was sitting in the ancestral hall, hugging her cold memorial tablet and muttering. To be honest, she really didn't know what kind of mood to face her at that time. She also didn't know how to scold her. That was her mother, her birth mother, the birth mother who brought her to this world. Even if she sank into hell and went through 1,000 twists and turns for the rest of her life, she was still her mother. Moreover, Long Chuyun's original intention wasn't to make her suffer. She just wanted her daughter to live an ordinary and smooth life. Even if she was mediocre and couldn't return to the divine continent for the rest of her life, it didn't matter. Did Long Chuyun love her? Of course she did. It was just that the way she loved was wrong. Just as Arbor said, being patient at every step wouldn't make the enemy give up on forcing the mother and daughter pair. They would only use cruel methods to hurt her and her mother over and over again. If she didn't fight back, she would just sit and wait for death. This was obviously not the ending she wanted. Mother, everything you've lost, I'll give you back. One by one, I'll take it all back. Arbor had already stopped crying, and a cold glint appeared in those watery eyes. She buried her head in the crown prince's embrace and gently bit that pair of thin lips. A bone-chilling coldness coiled around her heart. The Mu family, what they owed, they had to pay. Mu Xingqian stood by the mast and looked up at the approaching night sky. The scenery on the river was still the same, but he didn't have the slightest intention of appreciating it. He didn't know how long he had been standing here, but in the depths of his mind, he kept replaying what had just happened over and over again. The little girl angrily pounced over, and a fiery slap landed on his face. The little girl's hate-filled eyes were filled with tears. His heart was touched, and he subconsciously clenched his fists tightly. What woman? Who is that woman to you? She questioned him like this. She questioned him loudly like this. In that instant, his mind seemed to have gone blank, and all he saw was the little girl's angry little face. Xingqian. Mu Jingrui walked over and sighed. Don't think too much. Let's go back to the Mu family first and talk to old master about this. All these years, the old man has been trying to find his granddaughter. Everyone in the family knows about this. Mu Jingrui sighed. Actually, I already found your sister a few months ago on Seikong planet. A few months? Seventh uncle. Mu Xingqian abruptly turned to look at him. Then why didn't you tell us? Mu Jingrui smiled bitterly and shook his head. At that time, I knew that this girl had a huge prejudice against our Mu family. And because of what happened to Lao Bai, the little girl doesn't have a good impression of our Mu family. Mu Jingrui briefly recounted the confrontation between Old Bai and the little girl on Seikong planet, his expression somewhat thoughtful. Old Bai is too daring. He used the little girl's adoptive parents to threaten her, completely crossing the little girl's bottom line. Mu Jingrui closed his eyes and stood by the ship's railing, feeling the distant night breeze. He sighed and said, "Your sister is truly a genius." When she was on Seikong planet, she was only a level 14 mystic cultivator and an advanced level talisman practitioner. But after seeing her today, Mu Jingrui shook his head. She's improved a lot. I can't tell what realm she's in now either. Chapter 2472. Today, at the riverside, the water spirit surged violently, and the little girl's one move stunned everyone on the spot. Mu Jingrui merely felt that this little girl's cultivation had probably increased again. To be honest, Mu Jingrui simply did not dare to think of Arbor as a level 10 great spiritualist. In just a few short months, she went from level 14 mystic cultivator to level 10 great spiritualist. How could she possibly cultivate that? As for talisman master level, Mu Jingrui would never believe that Arbor had already become a black level great talisman master. 10 years. She said that she only needed 10 years to let everyone in the divine mainland clearly know that there was no such thing as upper, middle, or lower realms. Mu Jingrui took a deep breath and felt his throat tighten. The words that came out of his mouth were also somewhat hoarse. In order to prevent us from going to the lower star domain, the little girl even sacrificed a great deal of effort. She even did not hesitate to expend large amounts of talisman energy to construct a large shielding array above the Mo Kingdom capital. Just how much did she dislike them? Mu Jingrui laughed bitterly. Old Bai's threat caused her to completely lose any favorable impression of our Mu family. But I know that Old Bai's motive is for the Mu family's future. Mu Jingrui turned around and lightly patted Mu Xingqian's shoulder. Xingqian, you don't know her temperament, but I do. She's the kind of person who becomes stronger when encountering a strong opponent. She won't give in. A trace of self-mockery appeared on Mu Jingrui's lips. Back then, when we found her, Old Bai told her to return home with a lofty attitude. In the end, she really didn't appreciate it and hated us even more in her heart. I know that Old Bai is deeply ingrained with family values. He really doesn't have any bad intentions. He just looks down on my sister from the bottom of his heart, Mu Xingqian said coldly. Mu Xingqian said coldly, he thinks that since the Mu family has extended an olive branch to my sister, she should obediently accept it instead of resolutely rejecting it. Mu Jingrui laughed bitterly. That's right. He made a wrong move from the start. After that, because of my sister's rejection, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He felt that my sister shouldn't go against the Mu family and him. Mu Xingqian coldly rebuked, "Seventh uncle, I really didn't know that a mere servant would dare to be so impudent and try to kill my sister." Xingqian, they're all dead. Old Bai's wife and son are still in the Mu family, right? Xingqian. Mu Jingrui was startled. He suddenly regretted telling this child these things. This child wouldn't vent his anger on Lao Bai's family, right? Mu Jingrui felt a lump in his throat and sighed. Let bygones be bygones. Moreover, Lao Bai didn't gain any benefits at all. I suspect that your sister can draw the god's summoning talisman. At that time, when that man covered in peach blossoms appeared, he only used the power of one finger to make Old Bai, a level 11 great spirit master, self-destruct. Clearly, his cultivation base is very strong. I suspect that he's an immortal venerable expert. Mu Xingqian's eyes brightened. God summoning talisman. This kind of unconventional talisman was indeed recorded in the ancient books of the Mu family's ancestors. However, the runes on it had long been lost in the passage of time and couldn't be sorted out. Mu Jingrui nodded with a wry smile. The little girl's future is somewhat limitless. Back then, it was my fault for not stopping the impulsive Lao Bai properly. That's why the little girl's misunderstanding of our Mu family deepened. Chapter 2473. I want to take her home. Mu Xingqian clenched his fists. I will definitely take her home. Mu Xingqian turned his head and stared at his seventh uncle, Mu Jingrui, with eyes like cold lightning. Mu Jingrui couldn't help but smile. He was actually only 7 or 8 years older than Mu Xingqian. The two of them were uncle and nephew, as well as good friends. Their private relationship had always been quite good. Seeing Mu Xingqian calm down and recover his initial calm, Mu Jingrui also relaxed and nodded. That's for sure. Mu Xingqian was about to say something when he heard a burst of exclamations from the surrounding boats. The uncle and nephew duo leaned over the railing to take a look. Under the dark night sky, schools of fish were swimming back and forth around the corridor, swimming in circles. There were a dozen or so colorful fish the length of a baby's arm mixed in with the school of fish. They appeared soft and sparkling under the moonlight, attracting everyone's attention. Oh my God! Is that a colorful divine fish? What colorful divine fish? Brother, you're very knowledgeable, can you clear up our confusion? Colorful divine fish. The kind that flashes with light. I wouldn't dare claim that I'm knowledgeable. I've only read about it in the Divine Continent Chronicles. It said that eating these colorful divine fish can increase one's divine power. Eating one can increase one's divine power by at least 10%. And it's said to be extremely delicious. It's effective for experts above the 10th level of the spirit realm. It's just that this thing is too hard to survive and raise. Wow! Is that true? Why would colorful divine fish appear in Weishi River? The brother who was being flattered also said with a dumbfounded expression, logically speaking, this thing can only survive in a spirit realm. It can't be raised without spirit water from a spirit lake. Could there be a spirit realm near Weishi River? What kind of joke is this? We've lived near Weishi River since we were young, but we've never heard of any spirit realm near the river. That's not for sure. If there's a spirit vein in the depths of the river, none of us would know. Don't worry about this. Such a great opportunity can only be encountered by chance. Let me see if I can catch 2 colorful divine fish. That's right. Then we'll be rich. Everyone rolled up their sleeves, stepped on the bow of the boat and jumped into the river. At this moment, they couldn't care less about being reserved anymore. After receiving the news, all of them displayed their abilities and jumped into the river to catch the colorful divine fish that were mixed in with the school of fish. However, at this moment, the shoal of fish began to spin rapidly, and all of them surged toward a certain cloud. The speed at which it spun and gathered was simply astonishing. In less than half a minute, the number of fish in the river had decreased by at least half. The river was full of people. Many people were busy catching fish. When they looked up, they were stunned. He saw a slender figure in plain clothes standing on the deck of an official ship not far away. Her small, jade-like face was expressionless as she looked ahead. He quickly collected all the fish in the river into the storage talisman that was floating in the air. This scene reminded him of what had happened in the morning. It was exactly the same as what had happened in the morning. The school of fish in the water was once again taken away by the little girl with the storage talisman. The speed was so fast that it made people gasp in amazement. Slut! Mu Rouyan panted in exasperation. She had jumped into the river and splashed water all over her, but she hadn't managed to reap any benefits. Chapter 2474. How dare this woman? How dare she be so impudent? Did this Weishi River belong to their family? Absolutely not. The fish in the river belonged to everyone. How could she dare to put all of them into her storage talisman? She was so jealous that she was about to go crazy. Mu Rouyan's eyes darkened as she once again swept to the bow of the boat. She looked up and saw 7th Uncle Mu Jingrui and Big Brother Mu Xingqian standing by the railing. She immediately walked over with a belly full of grievances, her eyes red from anger. Big Brother, 7th Uncle. Look, it's that slut again. She snatched away all the colorful divine fish. I just heard people say that the colorful divine fish in the water can increase the divine power of a godly realm expert after eating it. Are you a godly realm expert? Mu Xingqian mocked bluntly. Mu Rou Yen immediately looked like she was about to cry. She couldn't bear to hear her big brother speak in such a tone. She softly said, "Big brother, I'm doing this for the good of our Mu family. If I get this colorful divine fish, I can give it to the uncles and elders in the family to eat. Everyone has their own fate. If it's not yours, why are you demanding it?" Mu Xingqian coldly swept a glance at her before looking away. "Why aren't you going in to change your clothes?" She didn't look like a well-bred young lady at all with her drenched appearance. She really didn't know how concubine shirt taught her daughter. She didn't have the elegance and bearing of a noble lady in the imperial capital at all. She was far inferior to Rou Xian. Mu Rou Yan was angered and had a taste of her big brother's medicine. She immediately stomped her feet and ran away while sobbing. She knew that in her big brother's heart, only that slut Mu Qingya and her daughter were his family. He didn't care about her, his second sister, at all. "She's so unruly. She's made a fool of herself in front of seventh uncle," Mu Xingqian indifferently said. Mu Jingrui waved his hand and stood under the dome of heaven with his hands behind his back. He looked up at the vast starry sky and sighed. 10 years to stir up a storm. Does it really need 10 years? Mu Xingqian looked at him with slight surprise. Imperial capital, Dragon Flame City's western suburbs. The Mu residence was surrounded by mountains and forests, sitting on the ground with great enthusiasm. 2 spirit stallions with snow-white fur were dragging a luxurious silver carriage. Stepping on the short withered grass all over the mountains, they came to a stop in front of a large house. The words Mu Clan hung in the middle of the door. This place was actually the Mu residence's back door. The front door was located right in front of the mountain forest. It was a very grand place. The 2 old nannies who were following the carriage looked at each other and smiled. They took a few steps forward and bent down in front of the carriage. "Miss, we've arrived. Please get off the carriage." After saying that, he stepped forward and respectfully lifted the curtain. A beautiful servant girl with golden makeup lowered her head and got out of the carriage. She turned around to help the woman in the carriage and said with a smile, "Young miss, be careful." The woman was dressed in a purple dress. She held on to her maid's arm and slowly got off the carriage. She had willowy eyebrows and pink cheeks. Her skin was dark and slightly tanned. Her eyebrows were half raised, and her eyes were sharp and shrewd. Her appearance wasn't as beautiful as the little maid beside her. Fortunately, her clothes were made of good material. She looked noble and dignified, adding some charm to her appearance. She looked up at the Mu residence's back door, feeling unbearably excited. Really came to the divine continent. She came to the divine continent. She was about to enter such a large aristocratic family and become the Mu family's legitimate young miss. At this point, she thought she was dreaming. Chapter 2475. Gagaga. The Mu estate's black lacquer door was pulled open from the inside. The person's voice arrived before the person arrived, and a faint fragrance wafted over. "Ahahaha. This is Miss Chiao, right? Come, let concubine mother take a good look. TSK, tisk, you've grown up to be so beautiful." The woman wore a plain satin dress made of floral fabric and an indigo robe with gold patches on the outside. There was a sunflower ornament on her forehead, and her figure was plump and well-proportioned, looking very graceful. At this moment, the woman's mouth held a trace of a smile. She held the young miss's hand very affectionately, and spoke as if she was very familiar with her. The young miss, on the other hand, was a bit ill at ease. She timidly glanced at the woman. You are concubine Mother Sure. Yes. Concubine Mother Sure's eyes flashed, and she smiled very warmly. She personally took the young Miss's hand and said, calling me Miss Jiao is too formal. Concubine Mother heard that your village calls you Jojo, right? Ah ha ha ha. Then Concubine Mother will call you Jojo. About your matter, Concubine Mother has already told your father. Don't panic, don't panic. Let's go see your father first. Jojo, you've been tired from the journey. Did those servants neglect you? No, no, they're all very good. The young miss pursed her lips and smiled. Her smile was awkward no matter how one looked at it. Seeing her coy and ungenerous behavior, the smile on Concubine Mother Sure's face deepened. When she turned her head and saw the young miss standing on the threshold rolling her eyes, she hurriedly smiled and said, Royun, what are you standing there for? Why aren't you quickly greeting your big sister Jojo? Mu Royun swept a glance at the young miss, rolled her eyes, and made a tisk sound. She turned and walked inside. What big sister? Looking at that rough skin and that big black face, even if she wore gold and silver, it wouldn't change her rustic nature. Before she even got close, the smell of horse dung and cow dung hit her in the face. It stinks to death. This child. Concubine Sure glared at Mu Royun, then turned around and smiled at the young miss, Jojo, don't be angry. This is your sixth sister, Royun. She's been wild since she was young, don't lower yourself to her level. Let's go see your father now and get him to teach her a lesson. No, no, no. That young miss hurriedly shook her head and smiled awkwardly. Sixth sister is still young and innocent. Concubine Mother, please don't teach her a lesson for me. Mother, I heard that my older sister, who is living outside, is only 15 years old. She's only 1 or 2 years older than me. Why did he look so old? You look like an old woman who has been married in her 30s. The young miss, who was mocked by Mu Royun, had a stiff expression on her face. She was so nervous that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. Child, what are you talking about? Concubine Sure glared angrily at her daughter. She went forward and pulled her young miss with a smile. Don't listen to her nonsense. All these years, you've suffered so much outside. When you come back, you have to take good care of yourself. This flower-like appearance, you'll definitely be able to recover. Don't worry, our Mu family has a lot of beautifying pills. Just eat a few. Thank you, concubine. That young miss's voice clearly carried a trace of excitement. That pettiness that couldn't be seen in the Hall of Elegance caused the smile in Concubine Sure's eyes to deepen. Go, go, go. Let's go see your father. Your father is waiting for us in the main courtyard. Chapter 2476. The woman pursed her lips to hide the mockery and amusement in her eyes. She pulled the young miss's hand and walked toward the main courtyard. Pushing open the main courtyard's doors, Concubine Sure pulled the young miss inside and called out with a smile, Lord is overjoyed, Lord. Our family's miss has returned. Along the way, all the servants used curious gazes to size up this slightly tanned young miss, who clearly looked like a country bumpkin, and secretly inquired about her identity. Concubine Sure cheerfully pulled the young miss's hand into the main hall. When she saw Mu Qingya sitting beside Mu Jingfeng and leisurely looking up at her, the smile on her face involuntarily stiffened. Mu Jingfeng's eyebrows reached his temples, and his eyes were cold. Dressed in a cyan robe, his figure was tall and straight, and his appearance was young and handsome. It was impossible to tell that he was a middle-aged man. Mu Xingchen's appearance was 50 to 60% similar to his father's. Concubine Sure tugged at the dazed young miss and hurriedly said, What are you spacing out for? Jojo, quickly greet father. Wait. Mu Qingya spoke coldly and raised her hand. Concubine, sure, I remember Xingchen telling me that his younger sister looks like she's 15 years old and is very beautiful. That young Miss's face abruptly stiffened, and her hands, which had shrunk into her sleeves, clenched tightly, unable to suppress the faint trembling. Moreover, didn't you leave the matter of finding the young Miss to Xingchen? Where did you bring her back from? Mu Qingya glanced at the woman mockingly and turned to say to Mu Jingfeng, Lord, this matter is of great importance. We still have to investigate it properly. Mu Jingfeng coldly looked at the young woman standing below, who looked like a cowardly quail. His brows suddenly furrowed. Sister, what do you mean by that? Eldest young master is concerned about his younger sister, but don't tell me I'm not concerned about our Mu family's young miss who has been stranded outside. I'm being kind by bringing the young miss back from a lower star domain like Seacombe Planet. Don't wrongly accuse me. Mu Qingya heavily placed the teacup on the side table. Sure, Huixin, watch your words. Do I, as the madam of the household, need to wrongly accuse you, a concubine? Concubine Shirk secretly pursed her lips and forcefully tugged at the young miss in her hands. The young lady hurriedly knelt down and said timidly, Greetings, father, mother. Concubine Shirk covered her mouth and laughed. I have evidence here. Bring him in. Soon after, a man and a woman were pushed into the hall. They stood in the middle of the hall and hurriedly knelt down. The old woman, who looked to be in her 50s, shouted at the top of her lungs, Master Mu, Madam Mu. I can prove it, this boy, that he's screaming, Arbor. I am her adoptive father's aunt. My surname is Li. The old woman chuckled and tugged at the thin and tall man beside her. This is my son, Kong. We are very familiar with her adoptive father's family. We all lived together in Kwoto village on Seacombe Planet for many years. The old woman's lips curled as she hurriedly said, Master Mu, Madam Mu, Jojo is very good. Their whole family is very good. Mu Qingya frowned and turned to say to Mu Jingfeng, Xingchen, this child, told me not long ago that her younger sister came to the Divine Continent, which means that our young miss came to the Divine Continent by herself. But concubine sure picked someone up from Seacombe Planet now. I'm afraid you picked her up wrongly. Chapter 2477. When concubine sure heard this, she rebutted indignantly, Sister, I don't like what you're saying. Although eldest young master's cultivation is high, it doesn't mean that he's accurate in judging people. Does he have evidence to prove that the young lady he met in China is the one from our Mu family who was stranded outside? You casually found two people here, and that's proof. Mu Qingya said indifferently, You're the one with a bad brain, yet you want to think that other people's brains are bad as well. Husband. Concubine sure immediately pouted, looking like she was complaining to the heavens and earth but daring not to complain to her mistress. She pulled out a handkerchief from under her sleeve to wipe her eyes and sobbed. This concubine worked hard and inquired from many sources for the sake of this family. It wasn't easy for this concubine to bring our young lady back, yet madam is still making things up for me like this. Enough. Mu Jingfeng, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke. He stood up and coldly said, Deal with this matter as you see fit. There's no need to tell me too much about these inner residence matters. Mu Jingfeng strode out of the hall, not even sparing a glance at the young lady kneeling on the ground from the corner of his eye. The old woman kneeling behind the young lady secretly pursed her lips and sneakily looked up to exchange glances with her son beside her. Concubine sure chuckled and looked up at Mu Qingya provocatively. Madam, then. Since husband has spoken, please arrange a courtyard for the young lady to stay in. It turned out that in husband's heart, this daughter who had been stranded outside wasn't that important. A mocking glint flitted across Shi Huixin's eyes. Mu Qingya coldly glanced at her her gaze landing on the cowering young lady kneeling on the ground. "What's your name?" "Qiao." "Qiao, Jojo." "She's called Mu Qiao," Shi Huixin answered with a chuckle. "Madam, you can just call her Jojo." Half an hour later. The old woman pulled her son and returned to the small courtyard that Madame Mu had temporarily arranged for them with the young lady. Although it looked like a very ordinary small courtyard, the layout of the courtyard and the room, the silks, satins, and embroidery simply dazzled the three. The three of them had never lived in such a nice courtyard in their entire lives. They hurriedly entered the room together. The old woman immediately cried out excitedly, "Chun, Song, this time, the three of us will have a good life. Mother, you're taking too much of a risk. If you ask me to pretend to be someone from Arbor and they find out, they'll kill us like we're ants. We won't even be able to reason with them." As soon as her son shouted, his mouth was covered by the old woman. "What are you yelling about?" The old woman sneakily hid behind the door to take a look. Fortunately, there were no servants in the garden. Only then did she heave a sigh of relief and hit her son's arm hard. "This is related to your sister's future happiness. I'm telling you, you better watch your mouth and don't go around talking nonsense. Ing Chen, don't be afraid. This matter, I think." The old woman's small eyes flashed. "Moreover, we didn't come here on our own accord. It was that concubine Shi who brought you back. Even if there's a problem, it's their own fault. What does it have to do with us?" Xiao Ing Chen nervously pinched her handkerchief, her heart uneasy as she said, But that sick sister today, that Mu Royun, said the moment she saw me, she said that I was acting old." Chapter 2478. She was 21 years old now, so it was impossible for her to pretend to be a 15-year-old girl. Moreover, she had been hiding on Seacombe Planet all these years, living the life of a beggar in the open, so her skin naturally couldn't be as supple as a young girl's. "Ing Chen, don't be afraid. Mother is here for everything." Madame Nay put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest. "Just stay here with peace of mind. To outsiders, just say that I'm your aunt. Your younger brother is your younger cousin. The three of us will stay here for a while first. Mother, I heard that the people here are all cultivating. What kind of cultivation have they cultivated to? Spiritualists, right? That seems to be the case. Look at your younger brother, he's only a level 3 mystic cultivator now. Then if your younger brother has the support of such a large family clan's cultivation resources, then his realm will definitely rise." Madame Nay had a good plan, and her shrewd eyes were filled with yearning for a happy life. "Mother, we won't be exposed, right?" Xiao Ing Chen actually didn't have much confidence herself. "How could that be? We just have to insist that you're Arbor. Who here has seen her before, so how could they expose you?" Xiao Tsong had used some brains at this time, especially since he didn't get a good ending every time he went against Arbor. He kept feeling uneasy and felt a bit apprehensive at the mention of Arbor. "Mother, can you not be so naive? What kind of identity does Arbor have? Is it so easy to impersonate the Crown Princess of Mo Kingdom? What's wrong with the Crown Princess?" Madame Nay put her hands on her hips and revealed a shrewish look. "She's already living so well, so she can just stay in her palace and be the Crown Princess. No one will fight with her for anything." "Song, why are you so timid now? If your older sister gets the benefits, will you not get a share? Besides, that Arbor is still in the Mo Kingdom's palace on Seacombe Planet right now. Don't worry, she's living like a princess. This was the divine land. Who would know that she was the crown princess? We're all relatives. What's wrong with letting your sister use her identity and live a good life? It's not like she'll lose anything." After hearing Madame Nei Li's fallacious reasoning, Xiao Yingchen felt more confident. She nodded and said, "That's true. This place is thousands of kilometers away from Seacone Planet. If no one brought her here, she wouldn't be able to come over." "Oh, isn't that so?" Ever since the mother and her children failed to rob rice on the street and were sent to prison for causing trouble, they had been living in seclusion ever since. Miss Chiao had long forgotten about these three flies. Later on, these three people were exiled from the Mo Kingdom capital to work in the mines. By chance, they escaped and fled back to Quoto village in a sorry state. When Shi Huixin found the three of them, they were already on the verge of death from starvation. How could Xiao Yingchen not firmly grasp this opportunity to eat well and live well, achieve meteoric success and leave the hell on earth like Seacone Planet for the divine land? No matter what, she was also surnamed Xiao and was family with Arbor. Since her sister wasn't coming to the divine land, it wasn't a big deal for her to take her place as a relative, right? Mom was right. She was Arbor's crown princess. Every day, she was dressed in luxurious clothes and feasted on delicacies. Her days were so comfortable, so what was wrong with helping out a poor relative? From now on, she was the Mu family's precious young miss. Her days would definitely be better and better. Chapter 2479. Bam! Concubine Shi looked up at her daughter who rushed in and said with a frown, "You're really becoming more and more rude. Mother, you clearly know that woman is a fake. Why did you bring her back? I feel disgusted just looking at her. She has an ugly and dark face. She's already so old, yet she's still pretending to be young. I won't call this kind of petty country bumpkin my older sister." Mu Royun said angrily. "You child." Shi Huixin swept her a helpless glance and beckoned her over. "Come sit next to Mother." "Mother." Mu Royun squeezed to her side and leaned into Shi Huixin's arms, pouting. Shi Huixin poked her younger daughter's forehead lovingly. "Do you think Mother is really stupid? Since we know that girl will come back sooner or later, why don't we happily welcome her back? It's easier to control her if we find a stupid one." Mu Royun looked at concubine Shi in slight surprise. "Mother, you mean? That real Arbor is much more powerful than this fake one. More than more powerful. This idiot from a small family can't compare at all." Shi Huixin humphed. "Let's find something that can't be shown in public and have it in our hands. It's much better than that girl really coming back to cause trouble. But Madam will be the first to find fault with this matter. A fake will always be a fake. Someone will expose it one day." Humph. Shi Huixin pursed her lips. That kind of woman is used to being a good person in front of eldest young master. She doesn't even find it tiring. I don't believe that she doesn't have any selfish motives. So what if it's exposed? By then, Arbor's reputation will already be tarnished. Shi Huixin waved her hand carelessly. She didn't tell her daughter many things. After all, her younger daughter couldn't keep secrets. For example, when she found out about Arbor's crown princess identity, she was actually very shocked. She definitely didn't expect that this daughter of the Mu family who had wandered outside would actually coincidentally marry His Highness the Crown Prince of the Divine Continent on Seacone Planet. That wasn't a small Mo Kingdom's Crown Prince. That was His Highness the Crown Prince of the Great Divine Continent. But so what? The Great Emperor would definitely not acknowledge this marriage. When the time came, the Crown Prince would definitely find another good partner. As for her Arbor. A trace of disgust and coldness flashed through concubine Shi's eyes. She should be in the dust and be trampled on by others. Her daughter should be coquettishly pampered. All the glory of the Mu residence should belong to her daughter. There was no need for an outsider to exist in this world. Qin stayed the opposite shore of the lake. When Qin Xian ascended Panyu Pavilion, he took off the cloak on his body and handed it over to the manservant following behind him. Little brother Xayan, what are you busy with? I haven't seen you for a while. Omega Kotoku raised his head and looked at his smiling big brother. He asked expressionlessly, Big brother, why are you here? Yeah, I'm bored. Eldest young Sir Qin sat down in front of him with a grin and didn't stand on ceremony. He directly reached out to take the teapot from the table and poured himself a cup of piping hot tea. I heard that you arranged for fifth brother to go to Weishi Langfang to relax. That's right. Eldest young Sir Qin smiled and nodded. I saw that he was cooped up at home and had nothing to do recently, so I let him go out for a walk. Second young sir. A man dressed in yellow hastily ascended the pavilion as if he were flying. Chapter 2480. When he turned and discovered that eldest young Sir Qin was also present, he involuntarily paused. Yo, isn't this Wang Chung? Why are you suddenly not speaking after seeing this young sir? You can't even let me know about this. Do you want me to leave now? Eldest young Sir Qin asked with a grin as he fanned himself with a teacup in one hand. Speak, Omega Kotoku replied dryly with downcast eyes. Yes. Wang Chung glanced at eldest young sir, inwardly musing that this eldest young sir was still so insensible. After some hesitation, Wang Chung still said, this subordinate heard that the Mu family brought back a young lady that they had lost contact with outside last night. What does the Mu family finding a daughter have to do with us? Upon hearing this, eldest young Master Qin immediately waved his fan, showing a disinterested expression. It has a lot to do with us. Wang Chung suddenly raised his voice, his eyes brimming with the light of gossip. Eldest young sir, do you know that young lady's name? Her name is Arbor, but after entering the Mu family, she changed her name to Mu Qiao. She was also brought over from Sikong planet. She also came from that small place, Quoto village. Pfft. Eldest young sir choked on his tea and started coughing violently. Qin Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and her gaze also landed on Wang Chung. His handsome face was expressionless, but his eyes appeared especially sharp. What did you say? Could it be that he had heard wrongly just now? Wang Chung knew that his young sir would have such a reaction. He had always felt that his young sir would become somewhat abnormal when it came to that young lady from the Qiao family. Wang Chung's mouth twitched as he said, that is that young lady from the Qiao family. I heard that she was brought back to the Mu family. Yes, she is the Mu family's long-lost daughter. Young sir, this is quite dramatic, isn't it? She was brought back just like that. Eldest young Sir Omega Kotoku and eldest young Sir Qin asked in unison. Ah. That's right. Wang Chung looked at the two young masters with a puzzled expression. He blinked his small eyes and asked, is there a problem? The two brothers looked at each other and saw some doubts in each other's eyes. The biggest problem was that he didn't make a splash or create a ruckus. This was not JoJo's style at all. Since when had JoJo been so obedient? She was going to follow someone else back just because they wanted to pick her up? It didn't look like it. Eldest young Master Qin didn't know why he was laughing so strangely. He put away his fan and slowly poured himself another cup of tea, as if the guy who had lost control and almost spat out the tea was not the elegant and calm him at this moment. When did you go back? Why wasn't there any news before? Prince Omega Kotoku asked coldly. Just last night. It was already dark. Then the Mu family silently took her back. He left through the back door without alerting anyone. However, the other families in the imperial capital should have received the news by now. Back door. The two young masters exclaimed in disbelief in unison. Wang Chung. What was wrong with the back door? Was it so unbelievable? Impossible. Eldest young Sir Qin shook his head and snorted while waving the fan in his hand. It can't be Jojo. The young lady wasn't one to be taken advantage of. Not to mention the back door, even if it was the main door, there would probably be a guard of honor to welcome her back. Chapter 2481. Interesting. The eldest young sir clapped and chuckled. Who exactly is it that dares to impersonate my family's little miss? I'll definitely go over and take a look later. Young Master Omega Kotoku swept a disdainful glance at his eldest brother. Heh, when did she become your family's little miss? In that case, perhaps the little miss has already gone to the divine province. Eldest young Master Qin narrowed his eyes and sent the second young sir a frivolous look. Speaking of which, second brother, I've always wanted to ask you something. Back then, your clone was destroyed and you ran back with your tail between your legs. This matter has something to do with my family's little miss, right? How do you plan to deal with father? That old man won't take things lying down. You know that if the little miss comes, the old man probably has a way to sense her. I'll take care of it, young Master Omega Kotoku said solemnly. TSK, eldest young Master Qin stood up with a chuckle with a flick of his sleeve. Since you know what to do, then it's fine. I'll go over and take a look right now. Just which audacious bitch dares to impersonate my family's little miss? This matter will definitely be very interesting. Omega Kotoku. Since when did she belong to your family? You'll be beaten to death sooner or later if you say it so smoothly. After exiting the Qin estate, eldest young Master Qin was all smiles as he headed in the direction of the Mu estate. The eldest young sir searched the Mu estate's rear courtyard and finally found that Miss Mu Qiao, who had just returned home in a small, run-down courtyard in a remote corner. This simply made one speechless. The eldest young sir looked up at the courtyard of that small residence, then at the style of the upstart in the courtyard, and his lips involuntarily twitched. If his little miss knew that the Mu family was mocking her like this, her enmity and hatred would probably escalate. Shaking his head, eldest young Master Qin entered the courtyard with a TSK. Xiao Ying-chen just happened to walk out and saw a handsome man dressed in white fluttering in the middle of the courtyard at a glance. She nearly fell head over heels for him. Her little heart pounded, and her face flushed red. She stammered, You are. Could this be one of the Mu family's young masters? This is too handsome. Xiao Ying-chuan's heart raced wildly, and her maiden heart thumped loudly. She actually subconsciously took a few steps forward. Eldest young Sir Qin chuckled and suddenly charged towards Xiao Ying-chen like a beam of white light. Xiao Ying-chen was overjoyed, thinking that this handsome young master was also interested in her. Just as she twisted her body and took a few quick steps forward, she was caught off guard and felt herself being swept away by a gust of cold wind. With a bang, she crashed into the side room at the back. Bang! 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 Bang bang bang! The sound of a beating that made one's hair stand on end could be heard, accompanied by the woman's whimpering cries that shrank in her throat. This sound continued for almost an hour before it finally ended with a short and sharp gasp from the woman. Alas! Eldest young Sir Qin walked out of the side room and patted away the non-existent dust on his sleeves as he muttered to himself, Why can't I control myself? How dare he impersonate Jojo with such an appearance? When the Qin estate's hidden guards passed this news to the young master of Omega Kotoku in Crane Garden, the young master paused for a moment. Second young master's hand that was holding the brush paused for a moment. He looked at a black dot under the brush and silently changed to a blank piece of paper for himself. Bang! In the Mu Estate's Wupu garden, Shi Huixin smashed the teacup next to her with an ashen face. Chapter 2482. What an idiot! Shi Huixin cursed. She had originally planned to bring that woman, who was unpresentable, to walk around the banquet hosted by Madame Goen today. She wanted to let this Mu Estate's legitimate miss show her face in front of all the noble ladies. In the future, even if the real Arbor wanted to return home, his reputation would have been more or less ruined by this fake idiot. Who would have thought that there would be news that this idiot would be beaten black and blue by someone in the garden by himself until he was on the verge of death? Bodyguard Liu, go investigate. Go and find out what's going on. Shi Huixin's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that there was someone secretly hiding in their Mu family and had seen everything that she had done? She wasn't afraid of others finding out the truth. In any case, she just needed to say that she was deceived by Qiao Yingchen and her daughter. She was just dissatisfied that there was actually someone in this household who was secretly fighting for justice for that little bastard Arbor. Nanny Zhu. Shi Huixin turned to look at an old blue and white maid standing behind her and coldly said, could it be that the injuries are all on the face? When will it recover? If she insisted on bringing such a disgraceful thing out, Madame would be the first to reject it. Moreover, her motive was too obvious. Nanny Zhu was an old nanny she brought from her maternal home, so she was naturally loyal and could understand her young miss's intentions. When she heard this, she couldn't help but spit and say, that bitch, who knows if she fell on her own or not, but she still falsely claimed that she was beaten. The injuries are all on the face. The corner of her mouth is broken, and her eyes are swollen like a pig's head. In this servant's opinion, even if she used a beautifying pill and a healing pill, she'll need at least half a month to recover. How unlucky. Shi Huixin felt that her entire plan had been disrupted, and she slapped the stool heavily. The next day, Miss Qiao once again collected a shoal of fish. This time, the onlookers at Wei Shijiang didn't have anything to say. In any case, they were already used to it. Who asked her to have a storage talisman? They also wanted to collect a few fish, but their inner worlds couldn't store living things. Besides, the inner world was only a few cubic meters big, and it was used to store rare treasures. How could it be used to store fish? Sigh, comparisons are odious. He returned to Fish Orchid Planet and released the school of fish into the Orchid Sea. Looking at these jubilant fish swimming in the sea, they flicked their tails and jumped up, creating a series of sparkling and translucent water droplets. Arbor's eyes flickered. Mo Lien slowly walked up to her and held her hand. She asked softly, Jojo, are you still going to watch the competition today? Actually, he hoped that she would go. He hoped that she would completely forget about yesterday's unhappy matter and smile again. The little girl turned her head and looked up at him. It was as if she could feel his feelings. Her heart seemed to be touched by something. It was so soft that it was indescribable. She suddenly nodded her little head and gave him a definite answer. At that moment, Mo Lien's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. Clang! The gongs and drums sounded again. The onlookers in the corridor cheered violently. More than 10 pill refiners rushed forward and stuffed buns with elixirs into the mouths of the 30 pitiful patients. Are you feeling better? Are you feeling better, brother? Brother, can you see how many buns this is? One of them stretched out a finger and waved it in front of the patient. Bam! Chapter 2483. Holy shit, he's down. Doctor, where's the doctor? Come and take a look. Take a look. Amidst the chaos, 2 doctors immediately came forward to check on him. They immediately fed the patient a vomit-inducing liquid and helped him to the side to vomit. Arbor.Mo Lien had been paying attention to his wifey's expression ever since they entered Langfang. Now that he saw the corners of his wifey's mouth twitch, he knew that the little fellow's mood was starting to improve. Since last night, this little thing had been listless. She ate very slowly, and when she spoke, she would only reply with 2 or 3 words when you asked her 7 or 8 questions. Her listless appearance made one's heart ache. Now that her mood had improved, the Crown Prince deliberately teased her. He squeezed her hand and asked, "Jojo, what kind of poison are these people suffering from?" "Ordinary poisons can be cured by refining an antidote pill. But their symptoms don't look the same," Mo Lien continued. Miss Chow nodded. With a flick of her finger, a small porcelain bottle landed in her palm. Jojo's exclusive antidote pill can cure more than 200 ordinary poisons. "Jojo, when did you refine this antidote pill?" "I cooked it in a small stew pot in the early stages." Miss Chow frowned. "It's too ordinary." Mo Lien, pretend he didn't ask. He reckoned that this little guy was born to deal a blow to people. The two of them whispered in low voices, but it still attracted the sidelong glances of the pill refiners around them. When they heard the little girl's words, they glared at her with indignant eyes. What kind of joke was this? Using a small stew pot to refine pills? Did she think they were idiots who could be fooled by a few words? "Oh no, this young fellow seems to be dying. Isn't this poison too strong?" "You brat, what kind of bun did you stuff into his mouth?" "It's wrapped in poison." A middle-aged man furiously pushed the young pill refiner in front of him. No. It's the antidote, I gave him the antidote." "Impossible, even if it can't cure the poison in his body, it can't make his condition worse." "Fuck, do you know how to detoxify?" Doctor, give me some vomit-inducing liquid." Arbor frowned slightly and turned to look at an alchemist standing beside him. "Where did these patients come from?" "Of course I registered myself." The alchemist thought of the arrogant words the little girl had said before and didn't want to bother with her. But after thinking about it, he said, "There's also a reward for signing up to take the poison. After the event, everyone will get 1,000 spirit coins. They are all from poor families. 1,000 spirit coins is enough for them to live for more than half a month." "It's over, quickly suppress him," a doctor shouted. Several pairs of hands pressed down on the twitching man on the ground. Looking at the man's expression, it was obvious that he was exhaling more than he was inhaling. He was already on the verge of death. Arbor couldn't help but frown as he handed the bottle to Fong Su behind him. "Feed him one." Fong Su was dumbfounded. The Crown Princess ordered him around and it seemed like it was very convenient for her to order him around. "Why aren't you going?" Mo Lien disliked his slow reaction and glanced at him coldly. The latter hurriedly stepped forward, slapped open the patient's mouth, and flicked a pill in. "Hey, what are you doing?" Chapter 2484. Everyone looked at Fong Su and was about to criticize him all at once. The doctor who was squatting down to check on the patient shouted, "Shut up! Shut up! His pulse is stable. Poison. The poison is cured." Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What kind of immortal pill was this? It could cure the poison as soon as it entered the stomach. One had to know that this miserable brother had successively been poisoned by the pills and steamed buns made by several pill alchemists. Not to mention curing the poison, every time he ate a steamed bun, his body's condition would worsen. At this rate, they thought this guy would die soon, but unexpectedly everyone couldn't help but turn to look at the stoic-faced little girl standing in front of the crowd. This little girl didn't seem to find anything strange at all as she silently watched everyone. "Miss, may I have the antidote pill? Take a look." The doctor's eyes glowed as he stared at the medicine bottle in Fong Su's hand. This medicine bottle looked ordinary. It was pure white without any decorative patterns. However, the pills in this bottle were so extraordinary. Fong Su felt his hair stand on end from being stared at. Arbor motioned for him to pass the bottle to the doctor for inspection. However, the doctor exclaimed in a moment, "Miss, are these pills for sale? 20,000 per pill." The little girl waved her small hand as if she was selling trash, causing everyone's eyes to light up instantly. Mo. My wife was really selling trash. After all, these were pills that she boiled in a small pot in the early stages. Naturally, their quality and effectiveness couldn't be compared to the ones she made now. And, I'll buy all the antidote pills. Get lost, old Lee, don't you feel guilty? How can you take all the good stuff for yourself? I'll buy it too, I'll buy it too. Miss, give me 10 pills too. Everyone clamored. Miss Chow silently took out more than 40 medicine bottles and sold another batch of the accumulated trash. Including the digestion pills she sold earlier, her spirit coin card now had more than 11 million spirit coins. In a place like China, where prices were abnormally high, she could be considered a wealthy woman with more than 10 million spirit coins in savings. After all, she needed spirit stones to buy good things here. Spirit coins were still somewhat useful in the secular world. The little girl took back her spirit coin card. Her big eyes were full of vigor as she swept her gaze over the crowd. "Little alchemist, I am the shopkeeper of the Vigorous Pill Store. My surname is Lee. In the future, if Little Alchemist has any pills to sell, you can bring them to our pill shop. The price will definitely be fair. You're always welcome." Everyone was busy trying to worm their way into being friends with this little alchemist who looked extraordinary at first glance. Miss Chow blinked and started a conversation mode where she would answer a few questions. When everyone saw this, they said to themselves in their hearts, "An expert is an expert after all. His speech is concise and to the point, and he's especially imposing." Sir Jojo had earned spirit coins, so his attitude towards the owners of these elixir shops was quite good. While they were listening to their long-winded chatter, a group of people hurried over from the entrance of the corridor. The leader was a manservant with red lips and white teeth. He was led by an older man to Arbor. When he saw that it was just a young girl in front of him, his eyes revealed a faint trace of uncertainty. He raised his eyes to look at the old man. The old man hurriedly nodded and politely bowed to Arbor. "Little alchemist, please come with me. Little alchemist, please treat my young master's illness. You don't have to worry about the consultation fee." Chapter 2485. "I'm not going," Arbor said expressionlessly. That manservant looked a little familiar, and just looking at him made him feel displeased. In addition, his eyes clearly revealed a trace of suspicion and uncertainty towards her. Arbor was not born to be a masochist. If he did not trust her, why did he look for her? It must be a troublesome matter. She was about to leave Langfang, so she couldn't be bothered to get involved again. Ling Ji's eyes were slightly angry. What kind of attitude was this girl showing? She took a closer look and realized that this girl seemed to be the weirdo who had been collecting fish with storage talismans for the past 2 days. If not for the fact that young master's illness could not be delayed any longer, he definitely would not have come to beg her. Ling Ji's expression became slightly more restrained. She held her breath and said word by word, "Miss, my young master's chronic illness is acting up. He had no choice but to seek." Miss Chiao turned and left. Was this page boy sure he could speak? His chronic illness acted up and he could not find a better alchemist, so he had no choice but to seek her. What did he take her for? A backup alchemist. Not to mention whether she was happy to be treated or not, her attitude was unparalleled. She really thought of herself as a dish. Arbor sneered. He grabbed Imoyen's hand and walked towards the exit of Langfang. The two of them were about to return to the official ship when they heard the sound of someone falling into the water. Someone exclaimed, it's bad. Miss Meng fell into the river. What followed was a mess. A man carried Miss Meng, who had fallen into the water, over and laid her flat at the entrance of Langfang. Then, he took a few steps back uneasily. The middle-aged procuress of the 10,000 Red House ran over and cried, "This wastrel actually forced our Miss Meng to jump into the river." Someone cursed with righteous indignation. There were also people who pointed at the unconscious Miss Meng and said that she was pretentious. The middle-aged woman of Myriad Red House held Miss Meng's head and shouted to the people around her, "Is there anyone who can save our Miss Meng?" At this moment, a young man in his late 20s walked over. He squatted down and said, "I have a healing pill here. Eat it." The woman from the 10,000 Red House hurriedly took the medicine and gave it to Miss Meng. Not long after, Miss Meng slowly woke up. A few whispers could be heard from the crowd. Wang Yan's pills are indeed of excellent quality. Yes, although his pill refining skills are not bad, there's obviously something wrong with his brain. If there is nothing wrong with his brain, why would he reject the olive branch from Vessi's branch? He even angered the branch manager. Arbor's gaze had been fixed on Wang Yan ever since he took out the pill. The more he looked at him, the more he found him pleasing to the eye. He could not help but have an idea and beckoned to Wang Yan. "Big guy." Wang Yan turned around and saw that it was his benefactor who sold him the digestive pills yesterday. He hurriedly walked over and cupped his fists in greeting. "Miss, do you have any instructions for me?" The little girl rolled her eyes. "Did you refine that healing pill?" "That's right." Wang Yan smiled and nodded. "Thank you for your help yesterday. Those two are your friends." Arbor's small eyes swept to the side. Wang Yan looked over and nodded. Yes. Good Peng and Little Chow are my close brothers." The branch manager of Vessi Pill House was so despicable and shameless that he banned your brothers. Wang Yan's expression darkened at the mention of this matter. "I just don't want my brothers to be restricted by the rules of the Pill House." Chapter 2486. That's true. If you really enter that lousy pill house, you will be restricted greatly. Furthermore, I heard that the pill house is extremely black-hearted. Every time a pill refiner refines a pill, they will take 80% of the profits. Is that true? Arbor looked as if he was chatting very well with Wang Yan. That expression of his caused the surrounding people to be slightly stunned. Please, weren't they talking about saving Lady Meng? Why did they change the topic so quickly? Wang Yan nodded. Gung De Peng and Little Chow, who were originally standing far away, could not help but walk over and look at this young lady curiously. 80% is really black-hearted. The people from the pill house are probably rotten to the core. Everyone, there are quite a few people from the pill house here. How many people have you offended? Furthermore, the other pill house provides the ingredients, cauldrons and fire tools. Isn't it good to let the pill refiners earn 20% of the profits? The young lady did not care about the sour expressions of the pill house's people. Instead, she looked at Wang Yan eagerly. What plans do you have from now on? Wang Yan answered honestly. We originally wanted to win at the Milk Head Festival and obtain some spirit coins and ingredients. But now... Wang Yan laughed bitterly. We probably can't stay in Weishi Corridor Square any longer. We plan to. Wang Yan, do you think that you can roam the world just because you left Weishi River? Let me tell you. You have offended the Pill House. No matter which city you go to, you will not be able to live properly. Following this voice, Xiao Mu looked up and saw a short winter melon rolling over like a ball on his short legs. This person was probably Manager Wang from Weishi Corridor Square. Arbor ignored him and patted Wang Yan's shoulder. Brother Wang Yan, how about this? You come with me and I will provide you with ingredients, cauldrons and so on. If you perform well, I can even give you some more valuable pill formulas. We will split the pills 40 to 60. You 40 and I 60. What do you think? Are you interested in coming with me? Wang Yan was stunned. Geng Depeng and Little Chow were in the same situation as Wang Yan. They were both stunned on the spot. Arbor wasn't in a hurry. He quietly watched them and tilted his head, sizing up Wang Yan and the other two. The more he looked at it, the more reliable it seemed. Just thinking about it made him feel a little smug. In the future, Jojo, Sama would also have connections in his hands. He had talisman masters and alchemy masters. He had to quickly nurture the organization. God knows what would happen in the future. As the saying goes, if you have someone in your hands, you won't panic even if you encounter trouble. The quality of Wang Yan's elixir was indeed good. Although it was only a medium-grade healing elixir, its quality was close to that of a purple-grade elixir. Compared to the pills of any of the alchemists present, it was much stronger. If he was a talent, he should be nurtured well. It would be a pity to bury him in this Weishi River. On the other hand, President Wang of the Weishi branch was so angry that his face turned green. He really didn't expect that there would be a little girl who didn't know the difference between life and death. She actually dared to come here and snatch people away from Weisai. Are you looking for death? Weishi branch's President Wang had only spoken half a sentence when Mo Lien glared at him coldly, causing more than half of his imposing manner to vanish. President Wang looked suspiciously at Mo Lien. Who are you people? Chapter 2487. Fong Su stared at him coldly, then walked a few steps forward with his head held high and waved his hand in front of Manager Wang. Manager Wang did not know what was going on, but his eyes seemed to be able to turn and he immediately saw the appearance of the token in Fong Su's hand. There was a silver dragon carved on it. Was it? Could it be the highest level of Emperor's token? Oh my God, where did this great god come from? Why didn't he take out the Emperor's token earlier? Manager Wang was so frightened that his whole body trembled, and he immediately became more clear-headed. Although he still did not know the identities of these people in front of him, it did not mean that his attitude could not immediately change. His face immediately changed from a ferocious one to an amiable one. Mo Lien could not be bothered to talk nonsense with this kind of person. She turned around and said to the stunned Wang Yan and the other two, "The three of you, come here." Wang Yan did not know why, but when he heard the young man's voice, he quickly nodded and called Geng Dapeng and Little Chow to follow him. When he regained his senses, the three of them were already on the deck of the official ship. Arbor sized them up and asked, "Have you thought it through? Are you coming with me?" When Wang Yan thought of the Weishi branch manager's attitude towards this pair of young people, he immediately guessed that the two of them were not ordinary people. Moreover, the conditions that the little girl offered for refining pills were really too generous. She could provide anything, and even left them with 40% of the pills. These conditions were definitely the best treatment in any medicine shop in the three prefectures. Wang Yan and his two brothers looked at each other. When they saw the other two nodding at him, he gritted his teeth and agreed. Arbor nodded and said to the three of them in an extremely good mood, you will soon know that the choice you made today was definitely not wrong. Not only was it not wrong. Half a month later, when Wang Yan and the other two received the two precious pill formulas, they would be beaming with joy and praise themselves for making the wise decision back then. After taking in 3 subordinates that Sir Jojo thought highly of for no reason, the little fellow was in a good mood. When Ling Gu came over with a doctor to seek an audience, her expression softened slightly. This time, it was the elderly doctor who spoke. His attitude was very respectful. Arbor was a kid who grew stronger when he met someone stronger. Don't force yourself on her. If you force yourself on her, there's a 99% chance that she won't even look at you. Prince Mo already knew about her temper. If you don't put on airs with her, she can put on airs and be even more infuriating. Now that this old doctor was being polite, she returned the favor with a distant and polite attitude. The old doctor repeated what he wanted to say and then said sincerely, "Miss, please don't mind our previous attitude." This child, Ling Gu, was too worried about her young master's illness. That was why she was so anxious and rash. Young ladies' pills are so good, presumably your medical skills are also extraordinary. Miss, please step aside and let our young master have a look. The old doctor was trying to find any doctor in a desperate situation. After all, in this world, those who knew how to concoct pills might not necessarily know how to treat illnesses. Those who knew how to treat illnesses might not necessarily know how to concoct pills. Although there was only a single word difference between alchemist and physician, there was a huge difference. The little girl said with a straight face, "My consultation fee is very high." "Ah, yes, yes. As long as Miss is willing to treat me, you can name your fee." Chapter 2488. 1 million. Why don't you just rob someone? Ling Gu, who was at the side, stared at Miss Chow with eyes that were about to pop out of their sockets. After reporting the number, Miss Chow calmly sat at the side and looked at the sky. The more she looked at this girl, the more she hated her. She clearly had a fair and cute appearance, but she just had to have facial paralysis. So what if she had facial paralysis? She was even a black-hearted facial paralysis. Just looking at her made one dislike her. Fong Su was speechless. My crown princess is too much of a scammer. How can I resolve this? After this trip, Fong Su already knew that if he wanted to make the crown prince happy, he had to obey the crown princess in everything. If the crown princess said something, there was no need for him to say anything. If the crown princess said to sit, if he stood, he would be going against the crown prince. It was fine to offend the crown prince, but if he offended the crown princess, he would be dead meat. 2 million spirit coins. Arbor raised her small hand disinterestedly. Okay. 2 million it is. Before Ling Gu could react, the old physician had already agreed without hesitation. Was Dr. Chang an idiot? Ling Gu looked at the old physician in shock. The old physician could only smile bitterly. After this interaction, he basically understood the girl's temperament. If you hesitated for a second and agreed, she could raise the price to 3 million spirit coins in a second. Do you believe it? Ling Gu was as angry as a toad, and her cheeks were puffed up. He looked like a 17-year-old youth with red lips and white teeth. If an ordinary girl saw him, she would definitely be delighted. However, Sir Jojo looked at him coldly as if he was a cabbage. Ling Ji's body trembled inexplicably, and she felt that this girl was too strange. Physician Chang also felt that he was particularly persistent today. However, he had always believed in his feelings. For some reason, after observing the girl for 2 consecutive days, he felt that she was very confident. How could he be so sure that the little girl was definitely not an ordinary person? It should be a good thing to let her see his young master's troublesome symptoms. A few minutes later, Arbor slammed the curtain of the pleasure boat and walked to the deck angrily. Physician Chung followed her with a confused expression and repeatedly bowed with his hands folded in front. "Miss, did something happen?" "Bastard. You actually tricked me into treating a stinky man with indecent behavior." Sir Jojo glared angrily at Dr. Chong and Ling Gu, who had rushed over. "You asked for it. You used 8 types of aphrodisiacs, indulged in sex without restraint, and acted pitiful for what?" Arbor turned around and dragged Mo Lien, who was still in a daze, away. When Ling Gu heard this, a hint of joy appeared on her face. In the past, the pharmacists who had treated the young master's illness didn't describe the symptoms in as much detail as this young lady. This young lady was indeed an expert who didn't show her true colors. She could actually tell that the young master had been poisoned by 8 different kinds of drugs. Ling Gu was shameless at once. She knelt on the ground with a thud and grabbed Arbor's skirt as she cried out, Miss, you've misunderstood me. Our young master is innocent. Our young master was captured by evil people and forced to drink these drugs. However, he would rather die than submit and remain loyal. Even in death, he did not give in. You are an expert, you can see the symptoms of our young master at a glance, please save him. It was me who failed to recognize Mount Tai and neglected the expert. Little magic doctor, you can beat me up. I definitely won't cry out in pain. Get out of the way. Miss Chiao was enraged. Ling Gu cried out involuntarily, Little magic doctor, believe me. Our young master is still a virgin. If you don't believe me, you can go and check. Chapter 2489. Arbor was speechless. Mo Lien was speechless. Everyone on the boat was speechless. Ling Gu didn't know what she said, but the atmosphere on the boat suddenly became awkward and silent. So strange. What happened? He seemed to have said something very strange just now. Ling Gu lowered her head and looked at her own hands with a dumbfounded expression. She then looked up at the Lord Miracle Doctor whose face was ashen. Scram! Xiao Mu forcefully pulled back her skirt. Physician Chang's mouth twitched, and he quickly went forward to bow. Little alchemist, please wait. This child, Ling Gu, is a little lacking. Although he, went a little overboard, that is indeed the truth. Everyone was speechless. Physician Chang, Ling Gu, are you sure that young master won't beat you to death after he wakes up and finds out about this? Mo Lien couldn't stand listening to them anymore. This group of hooligans actually spoke so bluntly in front of his wife. Weren't they leading the child astray? Wife, let's go. Mo Lien hugged his wife angrily and turned to fly out of the boat. Seeing this, Ling Gu quickly went forward to hug Mo Lien's thigh. Earlier, there was a difference between men and women, so he couldn't hug Arbor's thigh and could only tug on her skirt. Now, he could finally hug her. Young master, don't go. You can go, but the little godly doctor has to stay. She has to stay to treat our young master. Sob, our young master is really too pitiful. He's such a carefree and elegant young master, yet he encountered such a thing. Sob. If that old woman from the National Security Agency hadn't harmed him, how could he have become like this? Mo Lien, who was about to kick this silly page boy away, paused and looked down at him coldly. Madam from the National Security Agency. Yes, it's that old woman. She's the one who harmed our young master. It's her. Mo Lien's eyes darkened faintly. The little girl hugged his neck and suddenly blinked. Is that National Security Agency your enemy? Her husband's handsome face darkened when he heard this name. It was definitely his enemy. The young lady decided to put this madam of the National Security Agency on her blacklist. Mo Lien lowered her head and smiled at her. That old woman is not qualified to be my opponent. Yes, yes. Her husband was such a proud person. Naturally, she couldn't compare him with a bunch of random people. The little fellow kicked her short legs and roared at Linggu, who was sobbing with tears and snot. Go and prepare clean towels and water. Prepare more hot water. Since it was an enemy that her husband didn't like, then she would save the person that the enemy wanted to harm. Linggu hurriedly left obediently. Mo Lien rubbed the little fellow's head helplessly. I'm fine. It's just that when I heard about this old woman's reputation, I was scared to death. This old woman was truly disgusting. In recent years, she had become even worse. She even dared to make a move against the Qin estate's people, so what else did she not dare to do? Arbor patted Mo Lien's chest. Don't worry. If she dares to cause trouble, I'll beat her up so badly that even her parents won't be able to recognize her. Mo Lien couldn't help but be amused when he heard this, and the pent-up anger in his chest was instantly swept away. He hugged his wifey and planted a kiss on her bright and clean forehead. Emichim, my chow is the best. Arbor blushed and looked at the people around him with a guilty conscience. Chapter 2490. Upon discovering that no one was watching them, the little fellow finally moved her limbs and slipped out of Mo Lien's embrace, walking towards the ship's cabin. Mo Lien beamed as she turned her head to look at her fleeing figure, discovering that the little fellow's ears were red. She had to hurry back to hug, kiss, and bite her. The little lady held a pair of small paws behind her back. She walked towards the unconscious fifth young master Qin with a solemn expression. At this time, the fifth young master's entire head was drenched in sweat. His entire body was curled up, as if he was being roasted by a raging fire, yet also as if half of his body was soaked in icy water, feeling icy cold. Arbor opened her needle bag and inserted a few needles into him first. Physician Chang stood to the side, and when he saw the little lady's acupuncture technique, a pleasantly surprised smile instantly appeared on his face. The little divine physician's acupuncture technique was truly marvelous. Arbor walked up to hold the fifth young master's wrist and checked his pulse with rapt attention, occasionally revealing faint bewilderment and astonishment on her face. How did all kinds of aphrodisiac powder get into this body? It's only weakened by half after so many days, but he actually managed to endure it. The little fellow was currently muttering to herself. The figure on the bed moved slightly, and a pair of watery black eyes slowly opened. When he saw the young lady beside his bed and discovered that his wrist was currently being held by the other party, the fifth young master immediately felt unwell. His entire face was abnormally bashful and resentful, and his eyes seemed to spew fire as he glared at Arbor. He exerted all his strength to pull his wrist inwards, berating angrily, "Why are you here? Who told you to bring her in? Get out! Get out!" Arbor pursed her lips. "You're still quite energetic." As she spoke, she stuck out a finger and inserted a needle into his chest. The fifth young master was horrified to discover that he actually couldn't move his entire body, and he didn't even have the strength to flick his pinky. "Ah, ah." The fifth young master nearly lost his composure and screamed crazily. His eyes revealed a deep sense of terror as he stared at Xiao Mu and shouted in a threatening manner, "You demoness, what do you want to do?" Dr. Chang saw that the situation was bad and hurriedly stepped forward to explain, young master, don't panic. This young lady is not a bad person. She is the little godly doctor that we invited for you." "What godly doctor?" They were all liars. "Liar. Let me go. You damn liar. When I can move again, I will definitely." "Forget it." The little fellow grumpily used a finger to press down fifth young master's slightly raised head. With your frail body, you don't even have the slightest bit of cultivation, and you still want to talk big? What can you do to me when you can move? You can't beat me, and you can't bite me either. The fifth young master's face was ashen as he glared at her. He glared at this girl with a venomous mouth. At this moment, he didn't know why, but he felt like dying. He was the Qin family's trash. No wonder seventh brother hated him to the point of wanting him dead. His existence as a trash was an insult to the entire Qin family. Big brother and second brother were so shockingly talented, resourceful, and had profound cultivations. Although third brother and fourth brother weren't in the same realm as big brother and second brother, they were at least talented in the younger generation. He couldn't cultivate since he was young. The light in fifth young master's eyes slowly faded away, and his entire body trembled on the bed. Useless thing. Xiao Mu took out a wooden brush and brushed a layer of oily green mud-like substance onto his face. Chapter 2491. Fifth young master's body stiffened, but he couldn't move now. He could only watch as the devil-like girl brushed a layer of green paint on his face. The most hateful thing was that Physician Chang didn't even stop her. Ah! After brushing his face, the little girl threw the small bucket in her hand to Physician Chang. Brush his entire body. Physician Chang's mouth twitched silently. However, he wasn't an ignorant person. The little girl's medicine bucket contained good stuff. Although the color didn't look good, it emitted a faint fragrance. There was no doubt that it was a pure herbal medicine. Little divine doctor, after brushing, will the medicine in young master's body be cured? Do you think it's that simple? The little fellow roared. This guy has been drugged with 8 types of medicine X, and it's been dragging on for a long time. Many of the powders have already penetrated deep into his flesh and bone marrow. How can it be so easy to remove? However, although this guy had no spiritual power cultivation, he was still considered a man. If a normal man was drugged with this medicine, he would have been licentious long ago. How could he still hold it in? Unbelievable. Could it be that he couldn't? Miss Chow froze. She put away the bad thoughts in her heart and coughed awkwardly. Forget it, he was already so pitiful. At most, she would treat him better the next time she came for treatment. Arbor said with her hands behind her back, "We're leaving for Long Yen City in the afternoon. However, your young master's illness is more troublesome. He needs at least 7 days of treatment." You mean, after 7 days, young master will be cured? He wouldn't have to suffer the torture and humiliation of Medicine X anymore. Physician Chang was excited. Arbor nodded, then asked curiously, "Let me ask you. Your young master's condition doesn't seem like he took a pill. How did he get drugged?" This powder seeped into his body through his skin and eroded his internal organs. If it was a pill, the effect shouldn't be so good. Physician Chang felt that this little divine doctor indeed had some skills. He didn't dare to hide anything and hurriedly told her everything. "It's like this, little divine doctor. That madam of the National Security Agency is a famous perfumer in our capital, Long Yen City. She's very skilled at making incense, but unfortunately, she doesn't use it properly. The incense she makes is very filthy." Perfumer. Incense production. Arbor nodded thoughtfully. Then her incense can also be used to make poisonous incense. Exactly. Arbor secretly put up his guard. He had to be careful of this old woman. Since she's not on good terms with Mo Lien, she'll definitely make trouble for me when I get back. Her perfume was so powerful, she didn't want to suffer a loss secretly. It had to be said that the little fellow had not returned yet, but she was already fully armed with a solemn expression. She was indeed very prescient. What do you think? We. Dr. Chang stared blankly for a moment before hurriedly coming to a realization. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Of course we're going back to the capital with the little divine doctor. We've been out for a long time, so we can go back now." What a joke! If he didn't follow this misgodly doctor, then how would he be able to treat the remaining days? Nothing was more important than the young master's health. He had to follow. Arbor nodded and turned to look at the fifth young master, whose face was painted green and who was glaring at her with a pair of starry eyes. The little fellow said to Dr. Chang, "Pay me 1 million first. When the treatment is over, then pay the remaining half." Chapter 2492. Don't worry, I don't cheat anyone. I won't lie to you. Yes, yes, yes. Physician Chang had a bitter expression. Under the murderous gaze of the fifth young master, he shakily transferred 1 million spirit coins to Jojo. Jojo took the money and left. He was still so straightforward. Physician Chang coughed and hurriedly called Ling Gu in to serve the young master. He didn't dare to look at the fifth young master's resentful gaze anymore. Master Jojo held her husband's hand and returned to her boat. Mo Lien immediately pulled her into his arms. "Jojo, you don't have to work so hard. If you want spirit coins, just tell me. I'll give it to you, I'll give it to you." "That won't do." Arbor waved her hand with a serious expression. "What I enjoy is the process of earning money." "Interesting." Mo Lien. Strangely, he always felt that when Jojo talked about earning money, her eyes suddenly lit up, as if they were emitting light. So cute. Oh, right. The little fellow snuggled into his arms and raised her hand to touch his handsome face. Lien. Her soft little hand directly pinched the man's face. Her eyes sparkled like sparks. "I have something to ask you." Mo Lien inexplicably felt his heart skip a beat. Looking at the little fellow's flirtatious posture, a bad premonition slid through his heart. "Do virgins like you usually have any thoughts?" Mo Lien. He felt as if fireworks were going off in his head, exploding with a bang. Colorful lights surged in his head, and he felt as if he was about to pass out. His weak self-control was already below freezing point, but this fellow was still teasing him with words. Moreover, her little body was snuggling in his arms. He couldn't take it. He wanted to pounce, bite, and sleep. Look at that fool just now. Although he can't cultivate, his willpower is quite strong. Arbor muttered to herself. Won't he be sick after holding it in for so long? Do you want to know? Mo Lien gritted her teeth and blinked. She lifted the little thing up and looked at it at eye level. Miss Chow suddenly felt a little scared. Huh? What did she say just now? Why did the man in front of her look like a tiger eyeing its prey? She quickly shook her head. Just pretend I didn't ask anything. How can I let you cower now? Did you enjoy your flirting just now? Wife, you'll know after you check if your husband has been holding it in for too long. No need. The little fellow hurriedly waved his hand and said with a serious face, how can I accept that? The two of them looked at each other with strange expressions. These words sounded strange no matter how one listened to them. Prince Mo suppressed his urge to burst into laughter, picked up the little fellow, and quickly walked into the cabin. Along the way, the little fellow was still nagging, Mo Lien, you really don't need that. Of course. Prince Mo said with a smile, aren't you curious? Don't worry, your husband is all yours, inside and out. You can check him however you want. Then, he gently exhaled into her ear, which was filled with his scent. Your husband must be a virgin. Arbor! Exclamation point. That's not right. She wanted to tease this man. Why was she being teased instead? Sir Jojo's face was a little red, and his heart was beating very fast. Calm down, calm down. The little fellow secretly rubbed her hands. Turning her head, her little mouth formed an O shape. Husband, bad news. That pervert Fong Su has been watching us. Chapter 2493. Mo Lien! Exclamation point. Fong Su. No, it's not. It's not, Your Highness. Listen to my explanation, explain. Oh my God. Splash. Bam. Fong Su inexplicably wanted to protest, but when he regained his senses, he realized that he had been kicked into the river. Yes, he had been kicked into the river, kicked. These two people were simply deranged. They had stuck together like glue and syrup the whole way. That was fine. What the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. What else could he do? He didn't expect to see such a scene when he came up to the deck to invite them over for a meal. Was it his fault? Was it his fault? It couldn't be. And even if he had seen it, he had planned to sneak away and pretend that he hadn't seen anything. In the end, the little crown princess actually screamed at him like that. Oh my God! Fong Su soaked in the river, looking like he had nothing left to live for. He didn't know that this was the feeling of a single dog being abused, the feeling of misery, pity, and tragedy. On the other hand, the crown prince carried his wife back to the cabin and impatiently tugged at his collar. He raised his phoenix eyes and blinked. Jojo, come quickly. Your husband is ready. You can investigate as much as you want, from top to bottom, inside and out. I'll let you investigate to your heart's content. Come. Arbor reached out to cover her face. She felt that although her face was expressionless now, her heart should be boiling. Her face should be so hot now that it could be cooked with porridge. What should she do? This evildoer, she couldn't take her eyes off him. How could he be so good-looking? He was usually cold and indifferent, gentle and courteous to everyone. Oh my God, she didn't expect him to be so seductive in bed. At this moment, this man had changed into a frivolous look. His phoenix eyes were blinking and the corners of his lips were raised in a frivolous manner, causing ripples in one's heart. Calm down. Sir Jojo looked at him with an expressionless face. She suddenly burst into laughter and jumped up, pushing him down onto the brocade couch. Then, she reached out to tug at his belt. He would be a fool if he didn't take advantage of her beauty. Following the principle of taking advantage of the situation, Lady Qiao Qiao decided to make a move on the peerless handsome man in front of her. All right. Since you've repeatedly asked me to examine you, then I'll reluctantly do a full-body examination for you. With that, her small hand tore the man's belt apart. Mo Lien was dumbfounded. Why didn't his wife follow the routine? Shouldn't his wife immediately throw herself into his arms shyly and roll around, begging for mercy and pitifully begging him to let her go? After that, he was especially merciful. He secretly bullied the little fellow inside and outside, and then solemnly warned her not to play with fire. If you play with fire again, I'll eat you. But the plot didn't go as he expected. Cold sweat dripped down Crown Prince Mo's forehead. My dearest wife, your husband's self-control is really not as good as you think. Don't make a fuss. Crown Prince pressed the back of the little fellow's hand and looked at her, wanting to cry. In such a lousy place, he wouldn't let his baby suffer. Although he was about to explode from holding it in. Husband. Look. You're reacting. Qiao Qiao cried out in surprise. Please, your husband isn't a dead man. If he still didn't have a reaction, wouldn't that be unacceptable? Oh, you guys are having fun. Just as the two were blushing, a discordant voice sounded. Chapter 2494. Mo Lien was speechless. Arbor was dumbfounded. He turned to look at Hu Shichin, who had suddenly appeared in the room and was looking at them with a smile. Master Jojo's face darkened as he communicated with Little Tree. Tree, get out here. Why did you let him out? Little Tree was crying and snot. The venerable immortal threatened me. He said that if I didn't let him out, he would cut Jojo into pieces and cook it in hot pot. Master, you don't know how scary the venerable immortal is. He squatted beside Jojo with a dagger and kept rubbing Jojo's face with it. I'm so scared, so scared. Boo-hoo. Master, I'm reporting you. Jojo is lying. The venerable immortal squatted beside him and fed Jojo a misty immortal seedling. Jojo turned against him. I'm going to kill you, you slanderer. Master, Jojo wants to kill Dian. Arbor was speechless. Jojo, help. Mo Lien wants to kill me. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's exclamation sounded in his ears. Arbor couldn't help but slap his forehead. The two of them were looking at each other like tortoises. Note that the two of them were at daggers drawn and looked like they were about to fight. Miss Chiao hurriedly shouted, I'll grill fish for you too. Eat those colorful divine fish. It can increase your cultivation. The two of them turned to look at her at the same time. They nodded and said in unison, okay. Thus, the little fellow led the two of them into Fish Orchid Planet and used her divine perception to capture two colorful divine fish. She planned to share these two divine fish with the two of them. Little Tree, Little Water, Little Soil and the others were attracted as soon as the fish were cooked. At the same time, Snow Leopard, Green Swan, Big Ape, Chirps and the Blazing Blood Phoenix all rushed over in a row. Xiao Mu dumbfoundedly held the two fish in her hands and stared straight at them just like that. These guys came because they smelled the aroma. Did they all want to snatch the fish from Master Jojo? Woof, woof, woof. The three puppies ran to her feet and circled around her. The weirdest thing was that the two eggs actually rolled all the way to her legs and rubbed against each other. Arbor! Exclamation point. You're just two eggs. Do you have mouths? Could it be eaten? Rub your sister. The three puppies pounced at her feet, and Arbor kicked them aside in annoyance. He sat down expressionlessly and glanced at Mo Lien and He Jichin. They're all here for food. Io, what's that fragrant smell? Everyone who sees it gets a share, everyone who sees it gets a share. Dao Wuji's voice drifted over. Arbor's small hands trembled slightly as he stared at Everlasting Blade, Fairy Ginkgo, and the others who were running over. He silently put down the two fish in his hands. You can divide these among yourselves. Husband, let's go. The little fellow pulled Mo Lien and ran out of Fish Orchid starlishlessly. He hurriedly ordered the Little Tree, block Spirit Realm. I'm telling you, if you continue to be unreliable, I'll cut you into pieces and throw you into a hot pot. The Little Tree whined and begged for mercy. Then, it hurriedly blocked the entire spirit realm so that those guys who were fighting over the two fish would not know that their master Jojo was currently taking out a colorful divine fish from his pocket and stuffing it into Mo Lien's arms. Husband, the two fish that Jojo roasted just now were burnt. You can roast this one. Mo Lien gladly agreed. She skillfully roasted a colorful divine fish with golden skin and sizzling oil. She carried the little fellow and smiled as she started to feed it. The scenery on the Weiqi River was boundless. The river flowed downwards. Under the setting sun, the official ship followed the sparkling river water all the way to Dragon Flame City. Chapter 2495. Xingqian. Mu Jingrui walked onto the deck and saw Mu Xingqian standing by the railing in a light white robe, gazing at the ship in the distance. Seventh uncle, look at this route. Is little sister also heading towards the imperial capital? It's very obvious. Mu Jingrui said with a smile, don't think so much for now. We'll have a good talk with this stubborn little fellow when we reach the imperial capital. Mu Xingqian smiled faintly and nodded. He touched his wrist and seemed to be able to hear the sound of his blood pulsing. Was this what it felt like to be connected by blood? Seventh uncle, you must talk to her properly this time. Mu Jingrui grinned wryly. After fighting with her so many times, I can tell. You can't be too strong with the little lady. The stronger you are, the more she'll prickle you like a cactus. I guarantee you'll get bumps all over your head. Mu Xingqian was speechless and glanced at his seventh uncle. Why is that Qin Estates ship always following Jojo? Who knows? Mu Jingrui didn't mind and shrugged. It has nothing to do with us. We'll reach the shore in half a day at most. Seventh uncle, you've been out for long enough this time. That's right. Mu Jingrui sighed. I still have to report work to the old man when I get back. It's so annoying. The uncle and nephew chatted casually as they watched the official ship on the surface of the river. There were quite a few schools of fish surrounding it. This situation had been going on for several days. Every day, when it was almost evening, the schools of fish would gather around the official ship. The little lady would come out of the ship's cabin to collect the fish in another incense stick's time. The two weren't surprised and were speechless. The little lady was collecting the fish as she went. She had probably collected a third of the fish in Weishi River these past few days. Jojo must love to eat fish. Mu Xingqian's brain started churning. I remember that Grandpa raised a pond of Jade Lake moon carps. When the time comes, I'll give them to Jojo. She'll definitely be happy. Mu Jingrui was dumbfounded and silently glanced at his nephew. Hey, young master, before you make such a rash decision, shouldn't you first ask the old man involved first? Just like that, Mu Xingqian secretly decided on a method to collect all the blue-cloth moon carps and give them to his younger sister. Lady Qiao Qiao walked up to the deck and raised her small hands. He stood in front of the railing with a serious expression, as if he could summon the wind and summon the rain. He silently watched as the school of fish was sucked into the storage talisman. Goodbye, West Jiang. Thank you for giving Jojo so many different types of fish. Lon Hai is finally not lonely anymore. The aquatic products here are really rich. Along the way, he had collected countless schools of fish. Speaking of which, shouldn't he dive to the bottom of the river to see if there were more plants? Arbor thought about it again. Forget it, it's better to keep a low profile. After collecting the fish, Arbor routinely jumped onto the Qin Estates ship to treat the fifth young master. After this last round of treatment, it could be considered as completely bidding farewell to this fussy and troublesome fifth young master. She really had never seen such a troublesome man. He wasn't a young lady who had to put a handkerchief on his arm when taking his pulse. If her fingers accidentally brushed against his skin, he would look like he had been touched. He would glare angrily at her with accusatory eyes while using unpleasant words to squeeze her. If it weren't for the fact that Physician Chung continued to pay the consultation fee of 3 million, she would have flung her sleeves and left. Chapter 2496. Do whatever you want. Don't think that you can beat Sundara just because you're good-looking. She only reserved the right to beat Sundara for her dearest husband. You still want to paint me green. Fifth young Master Qin glared at Miss Qiao with a dark face as if looking at an enemy. Bah! Arbor directly pinned him down on the bed with one finger. So long-winded. Did he think she wanted to paint him green? That green paint was expensive, and she couldn't bear to spend it all on him. Didn't he see old man Chang embezzling her remaining green paint for her? What an unappreciative fellow. The Qin family's people were all extremely disagreeable. After Miss Chow finished checking his pulse, she directly placed a small green sandalwood box beside his pillow. 100,000 for one antidote pill. Fifth young Master Qin gnashed his teeth. Who's poisoned? If you don't remove this residual fragrance, are you waiting for it to relapse? Arbor grumpily roared. Fifth young Master Qin was also infuriated as he glared at her indignantly. The pills you sold at the bread festival a few days ago were only 10,000 to 20,000. Why did you charge me 100,000? You're an eyesore. After saying this, Arbor directly stood up and left without even looking at this man out of the corner of her eye. Fifth young Master Qin was so angry that he collapsed on the bed, unable to speak for a long time. He only felt pain in his head, in his eyes, in his ears, everywhere. He was angered by this little girl. Lingu timidly flashed in and picked up the small green sandalwood box beside the young master's pillow to open it. A faint medicinal fragrance wafted out. Young Master Qin, it's a purple-veined medicinal pill. It's really good. Lingu was born in an elixir patrician family, so she naturally had great judgment. After a few days of interaction, Lingu, this fellow, had long prostrated under Sir Jojo's aura and alchemy realm without any moral integrity. He had truly never seen such a talented little girl. He probably couldn't find such an impressive little fellow even if he searched their entire elixir patrician family. Even the eldest young master and physician Chang were helpless against the troublesome fragrance in the young master's body, yet it was resolved by this little girl. Yesterday, Dr. Chang had secretly told him that the green paint that he had researched contained dozens of precious herbs. If he could develop it, perhaps in the future, his elixir shop would have another way to make money. If Jojo knew what Dr. Chang was up to, he would definitely sneer at him. Even if you studied all the herbs here, you wouldn't be able to make such a paste. After all, even if you search the entire divine land, you won't be able to find even a drop of water from the icy pool of Peach Blossom Star. Ever since the cold pond water entered the back slope of the Peach Garden slope, it changed almost every month. At this time, the cold pond water was filled with dense spiritual energy. The coldness seeped into one's bones and penetrated one's heart. She was an expert in making medicine. It couldn't get any better. Sir Jojo walked out with his hands clasped behind his back, not caring at all whether fifth young Sir Qin was taking his medicine or not. Anyway, she had already left the food behind. It was his business whether he ate it or not. Lingu and Physician Chang would take care of this fussy fellow. When Physician Chang heard the news, he ran out with a smile on his face. Thank you, miss, for saving my young master. No need to thank me. I was only doing this for the money, so we're even now. Arbor waved his hand. These few days, the consultation fee had been rising every day. Previously, it was 2 million, but because of this young Master Qin's fussy personality and Sir Jojo repeatedly went on strike, the fee had already risen to 7 million. Right. It was basically rising every day. The increase was very gratifying. Chapter 2497. Sir Jojo had been paid to do his job, so he requested to leave immediately after he was done. He had no intention of exchanging pleasantries with Physician Chang and the rest. Yet Physician Chang's expression was melancholy and reluctant to part. He had neglected to eat and sleep last night, studying the green paint for an entire day and night, but he could only identify 2/3 of the medicinal ingredients. This green paint should be brought back to the Qin estate and invited the various alchemists to appraise it together. Little alchemist, looking at your direction, you should be returning to the capital. If you have time, you're welcome to visit our Qin estate. Arbor waved her small hand. We're just settling the transaction. When we meet in the future, just pretend we don't know each other. Physician Chang, so melancholy. What kind of cold and indifferent personality was this? He had already pulled a long face and exchanged pleasantries like this. Woo-woo, the little alchemist still didn't want to see them. It was all Sir's fault for being fussy. He had indeed thoroughly offended this little expert these past few days. Arbor returned to her family's official ship and saw Mo Lien walking up to the deck. The man had come up at the right time. Seeing her return, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Wife, you're so early today. Arbor glanced at him speechlessly. There's actually nothing much to do today. I'll just take his pulse and feed him a poison cleansing pill. Mo Lien was in a foul mood. Jojo ran to the Qin estate's ship every day. Although it didn't exceed an hour every day, he was still worried. Once he thought of the Qin family's Ada and Ah air, he inexplicably felt stifled. This was a precise intuition. He kept feeling that these two people would do something bad. Let's not walk so close to the Qin estate's people in the future, all right? Okay. Arbor nodded his small head and answered without any objections. Anyway, she didn't like the Qin family. From Qin Guelu to Omega Kotoku to this fussy fifth young master, none of them were good people. Mo Lien's heart cheered again when he saw her agree so quickly. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and smiled at her. Jojo, you're the best. Xiaomu nodded her small head in all seriousness and said in all seriousness, I also think that I'm really good. Mo Lien hugged her and laughed. After the meal, the two of them had a good afternoon nap together. At 10:00 in the evening, the ship anchored at the shore. Arbor looked up and saw a checkpoint on the outskirts of Sovereign Capital. It was also quite large, making it look like a small town. There were many people coming and going. Many people were still lining up in front of the checkpoint, waiting to enter. After Mo Lien came ashore, she instructed Fang Su not to disturb the people too much and to keep a low profile. The latter quickly walked up to the soldiers at the checkpoint and showed them the imperial token in his hand. The other party was obviously shocked by the emperor's order and hurriedly bowed respectfully. Upon hearing the news, the small captain at the checkpoint came over and respectfully welcomed Mo Lien, Xiaomu, and the others over. Nothing happened on the way there. It's actually so peaceful. Arbor blinked curiously. The Crown Prince's return to the capital was such a big move that there would definitely be many forces watching. However, it was still early for them to come over from Weishi River. There will be trouble when we get back. Mo Lien curled her lips in a spurious smile. After all, it took time to send a message back and forth. They hadn't even stepped into the imperial capital's territory yet. Arbor looked around curiously and quickly followed Mo Lien through the checkpoint. Everyone changed into a carriage pulled by a spirit stallion and headed toward the imperial capital in a low-key manner. Chapter 2498. These spirit stallions were extremely fast. About an hour later, Xiaomu lifted the curtain to take a look. She immediately caught sight of the silhouette of the tall city gate tower amidst the night fog. On the city wall hung two large black words with gold background, Long Yen. The carriage crossed the moat and came to the suspension bridge. Fang Su only showed his face, and the city guards quickly let him pass. Jojo leaned against the window, looking at everything curiously, observing the city wall that went straight into the clouds. This city gate tower has been reinforced several times before. Mo Lien held her little hand and said, just in case. Arbor knew what he meant by just in case. Although there were no corpse puppets in the divine lands, who knew? If the power of Tianyun developed to this extent, then very soon, this pure land would fall into instability. Xiao Qiao was very much in favor of Crown Prince Mo's precaution. The carriage slowly entered the city gate's official road, and after a short while, it was stopped by another checkpoint. Fang Su jumped off the carriage, frowned, and went up to negotiate. When he came back, he bowed respectfully to the carriage. Your Highness, the holy nun of the Temple of Sun and Moon is about to enter the city. This main road has been closed for an hour. Mo Lien and Arbor were not people who had to take the main road to show off. Hearing this, they nodded and said, then let's take a detour. So Fang Su drove the carriage, turned around, and went to the side street. Your Highness, His Majesty already knows that you have entered the capital. Do you want to go back to the East Palace first, or go back to the East Palace? Mo Lien interrupted Hu Dequan and said lightly. Hu Dequan silently shut his mouth, secretly sympathizing with His Majesty. Your son doesn't like you very much. The carriage was heading in the direction of the Imperial Palace. From the city gate to the Imperial Palace, it was estimated to take 2 hours. But now that they had taken a detour, it would probably take more than 2 hours. Night had fallen, and all the houses were brightly lit. In the entire Long Yen city, the starlight and the lights reflected each other. Mo Lien reached out and stroked Arbor's hair. Looking at her sleeping soundly in his arms, his heart was filled with a faint sense of satisfaction. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Mo Lien raised her eyebrows slightly and lifted the curtain a little. Fang Su jumped out of the car and walked over quickly. He said in a low voice, Your Highness, that saintess has already entered the city. There are so many people in front that the carriage can't pass. Mo Lien looked ahead. The palanquins, carriages, and horses had all stopped. They were blocked behind the crowd. The main street in front of them was so crowded that the car couldn't make a turn. Fang Su's voice was dissatisfied. A saintess of the temple is making such a big fuss. She really knows how to put on airs. Mo Lien's expression remained aloof. His fingers lingered on the girl's soft and fragrant hair as he said softly, then we'll wait for a while. Under the night sky, Dragon Flame City looked magnificent. The rows upon rows of restaurants and tea houses on the streets were already filled with people. In front of the buildings and on both sides of the street, there were also many people who had come to worship the saintess of the temple. Along with the low humming of ceremonial music, there was a sound. The first to arrive were the 200 temple guards who were escorting the saintess. They rode on the back of a black wolf with shiny black fur that was half the height of an adult. They raised their heads and puffed out their chests, looking high-spirited as they glanced disdainfully at the people around them. They looked exceptionally arrogant, and the smugness in their eyes almost turned into a substantial sense of superiority. Following behind the temple guards was a group of honor guards. They blew a deep trumpet and beat a drum as they slowly walked over. Chapter 2499. Following behind them was a group of more than 80 white-robed priests who looked extremely holy. Each of them held a long staff of the same size with the same engravings on it. They walked with their heads held high and their chins slightly raised, looking arrogantly at the worshippers on the side of the road. Their domineering aura was fully released. The four corners of the saintess carriage were decorated with fist-sized pearls, and a curtain inlaid with gold and silver threads covered the body of the carriage. The crowd could only see a slender figure sitting inside. The more indistinct the figure was, the more anxious the people were. They felt that this saintess must be a peerless beauty. Behind the carriage, there were hundreds of young girls around 17 or 18 years old with graceful figures and white veils covering their faces. Each of them held a flower basket with many plum blossoms in it. They scattered the flowers as they walked, chanting something in unison. Finally, 300 temple guards brought up the rear. The procession moved along the busiest main street of Dragonflame City, Changle Street. The front of the procession had already passed through the central axis of Changle Street, and the rear of the procession had just turned into the main street. The grandiose procession of more than 1,000 people, who were singing and singing, attracted the attention of over 10,000 people from all over the city. The elderly and women bowed in worship, the young people looked envious, and the young children ran and cheered in the crowd. Sir Chow Chow woke up amidst this commotion. She creased her small brows and looked up to see Mo Lien's focused eyes. Chirp. The little guy was still in a daze after being kissed on the cheek. Mo Lien smiled with her eyes curved. Did I wake you up? But we should reach the entrance of Luxing Gate in about half an hour. You woke up just in time. The little fellow moved its limbs and leaned against the window to take a look. Its eyes reflected the scene of a grand celebration. Hey, there are so many people. Mo Lien, what are they doing? The Saintess of Sun Moon Temple has entered the city. All the people in the city are here to worship her, Mo Lien said with a slightly sarcastic tone. What temple? It was just a group of people fishing for fame. It was more like they were fooling the people. Of course, the Divine Palace had also recruited a large number of clerics and even priests who had pledged their loyalty to the Divine Palace. These people were collectively known as disciples of God. These cultivators attached themselves to the temple, obtained cultivation resources, and worked for the temple. Many rogue cultivators who did not have a family to rely on were very willing to join the temple. Greetings, Saintess. Greetings, Saintess. The commoners were all excited as they knelt down and kowtowed. In the hearts of these ordinary people, the Saintess of the temple had such a high status. She was simply the sun goddess that everyone looked up to. Silence. The Saintess wants to issue an oracle to warn everyone. Ah. Does Lord Holy Nun have anything to say? The crowd below was whispering to each other. For a moment, tens of thousands of people held their breaths and waited on Changle Street. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Arbor pulled Mo Lien out of the carriage. He raised his head and looked at the brightly lit area. The corner of his mouth twitched. It's quite realistic. Oracle. Hee hee. Citizens of the Divine Prefecture, citizens of Dragonflame City. Your crown princess, who is about to return, will become the source of disaster. She will be the beginning of the breeding of the entire evil world. She will bring us endless calamity, fear, and death. A cold female voice sounded without any cadence, with a trace of arrogance that could not be ignored. Curtains made of gold and silver silk fluttered in the air. A slender figure stepped out of the carriage. Chapter 2500. The Saintess's voice was very infectious. Everyone felt as if their hearts had been grabbed, and they could barely breathe. Their hearts were heavy, and the entire air was filled with the feeling that a storm was coming. Everyone did not even dare to breathe loudly. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from the left side of the crowd. There was a commotion in the crowd. Everyone turned around and saw an old woman in her 60s or 70s suddenly pouncing over as if she had gone mad. She grabbed the neck of a young man beside her with astonishing strength. The old woman's eyes were emitting a terrifying bloody light, and her dilated pupils were filled with blood vessels. She opened her mouth wide and was about to bite the shoulder of the frightened young man. The Saintess, who was wearing a purple dress and had a faint immortal aura, suddenly moved. She lightly stretched out a slender finger and tapped the old woman's forehead across the air. The old woman, who was still screaming and struggling with boundless strength, suddenly stopped as if she had been summoned by a Buddha. Her eyes were unfocused, and her hands drooped down weakly. The crowd pushed each other to make way, and screams rose and fell one after another. The women hugged their children and looked at the old woman who had suddenly attacked in horror. The young and strong men volunteered and tied the old woman up with a thick hemp rope. Disaster. Fear. Death. The crowd did not know why, but at this moment, they all felt extremely cold. The words that the saintess had just said were like an ancient Sanskrit that echoed in their hearts for a long time. Could this be true? Could the crown princess of the great divine continent, who was about to return, be a monster? Would she bring them disaster, suffering, and death? Everyone could clearly see that this old woman was over 70 years old and was an ordinary person. She should have been an old woman who was slow and powerless. But just now, when she suddenly burst out with that power, even the young man who she was holding by the neck, was unable to push her away. Wasn't this the source of the disaster? It was indeed the beginning of the birth of the entire evil world. The crown princess had yet to enter the capital, and a monster had already appeared in the capital. Terrifying. Everyone looked at each other in horror and saw a trace of panic and fear in each other's eyes. He raised his head and looked at the saintess in front of him. The purple gauze dress was ethereal, like the incomparably holy snow on a high mountain, and also like a saintess bathed in the divine light of the sun and moon. Everyone prostrated themselves in worship, and some even asked in fear, "How can we stop this disaster, saintess?" The saintess spoke in a flat tone, as if she was a cold-blooded machine. There were no ups and downs in her speech, and her eyes were indifferent. She looked at the people prostrating at her feet with benevolence and said to them softly, "Eliminate the source of the disaster, and the divine land will return to peace and tranquility. Destroy the source of the disaster." The priests standing behind the saintess suddenly raised their arms and roared. Destroy the source of the disaster. The crowd was agitated, and all the citizens began to shout in this forceful atmosphere. These fools. Fong Su's face was twisted with anger. Were they stupid? They actually dared to slander the little crown princess in front of the crown prince. They really didn't want to keep their heads anymore. While holding Chow Chow's hand, Crown Prince Mo stood at the periphery of the crowd. He gazed icily at that lofty and incomparably pure saintess of the Temple of the Gods, his eyes bursting with intense killing intent. Chapter 25:01. If not for Sir Jojo tightly holding on to Mo Lian's hand, the man who was boiling with murderous intent would have already flown over and slapped that saintess to death. What bullshit source of disaster? It was just glib words that incited the hearts of the people. However, the majority of the people in the world were people who had no opinions of their own and were easily swayed. After being casually called out by someone, they naturally became a tool for others to use. It's more interesting to swat this kind of fly yourself. After comforting her dear husband, Chiao Mu gazed coldly at the saintess of the sacred hall, who was clustered in the center. Fong Su's face darkened as he gave a look to the dozen or so forest guards accompanying him. The latter immediately understood and stepped forward, forcefully parting the crowd in front of them. Move aside, move aside, move aside a little. The dozen or so forest guards in heavy armor roughly pushed the crowd to the sides, quickly opening a path large enough for one person to pass through. Miss Chiao's cold and beautiful face suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Following her light footsteps, the crowd involuntarily parted to the sides. There was no need for the forest guards to go forward and push. Everyone very consciously retreated, step by step. They felt an extremely terrifying aura pressing down on the little girl's body. It was as if there was an innate pressure that made people involuntarily fearful. Saintess Nia Yaoguang seemed to have felt something as she suddenly turned to look at Arbor. Her pitch-black pupils abruptly shrank. The little girl appeared natural and unrestrained, walking into the middle of the crowd like this. It was as if she had been standing in front of the crowd from the beginning. Her appearance was not abrupt at all. "Are you talking about me?" Arbor looked at Nia Yaoguang expressionlessly, sizing her up from head to toe. She said in a mocking tone, "You guys have been silent for so long and can't wait to splash dirty water on me as soon as you appear. This method isn't very clever." Saintess Nia Yaoguang coldly stared at the little girl in front of her. After a long while, she used a lofty tone to coldly ask, "Who are you?" Lying on the ground, the old woman's entire body was twisted in an abnormal position. When he saw Arbor walking towards him, his head turned 180 degrees and his eyes glowed red. He let out a low roar towards Arbor. However, she was tied up with several thick hemp ropes and couldn't move for a while. Xiao Mu squeezed a pair of small, fleshy hands, and a black ferrule surrounded by a faint blue flame abruptly appeared in her hand. "The Saintess of the Temple. Let me teach you how to behave." Saintess Nia Yaoguang's pupils contracted, as if this was the first time she realized that Xiao Mu was actually someone who didn't play by the rules. Subsequently, her eyes narrowed deeply, and her entire body instantly tensed up as she abruptly retreated backwards. Xiao Mu had already pressed forward. There was clearly no wind, but the commoners standing on both sides of the street felt as if their robes and hair were being swept by a strong wind. They only felt as if a storm was sweeping past them. Bang! Bang bang bang! The blue spiritual cleansing flame ignited and suddenly exploded in front of the crowd. The shops on both sides were instantly taken care of by the strong wind. The signboard in front of the gatehouse, the cloth sails, and even the tiles on the eaves all exploded with bang 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 sounds. For a moment, the people sitting on the second floor of the tea house and wine shop to watch the show were all greatly frightened. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.